please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Welcome. All right. This is the first official meeting of the Hamilton-Wenham School District in person in a while. We've had a couple of workshops to iron out the kinks in the process. So we are maintaining our distance, wearing masks. Many of us are vaccinated, so just be aware of that. And we don't have to go through all the roll call and all that stuff because here we are in person. So it's super exciting. The first order of business is citizens' comments. We are waiting to see if there are any citizens online. They'll be connecting through Zoom, and we will recognize them if they raise their hands. All people are able to watch us on Zoom. That is being recorded, and you should just be aware of that. We do have some people here in the room with us. We would ask that people maintain 6 feet social distancing regardless of their vaccination status. Does anybody want to speak?
And if I could just clarify, we do have a number of people online. If you're interested in speaking, just raise your hand and we'll call on you.
If you want to speak, you need to come to the podium and you will be recognized. Please remember to follow the protocols. We have a 3-minute time limit. You must state your name and address.
You said you had people online. I'm more than happy to have them go first.
Right now, no one has raised their hands.
Oh, I thought you said there were. Okay. Hello. It's nice to see everybody. I must say it's harder to recognize you now. It's much easier to recognize you on the screen in my home. I'm Pamela Millman. I have a daughter in the 7th grade at Miles River Middle School, and I have a very quick comment, and I think it's more related to something that's on the agenda for next meeting, if I'm not mistaken. And it's, I'm sorry? Oh, it's more about the diversity, bias, inclusion, etc. training that has come up since the very beginning of the year. I have brought to the attention to each member of the school committee, as well as the superintendent, multiple situations that my family has had in relation to that at the school. I'm very dismayed at how the school committee continues to or not address the issue in its urgency, but spends plenty of time of when to schedule it and what definitions mean to them. I implore you, when you visit this at the next meeting, to consider reaching out of the district and do what many local districts in this area have done and get an outside consultant to come in so that you people really see and understand this better. I watched your workshops. I saw the heartfelt emotion and consideration that you had about this. I think you're missing a really important piece of it, and I think this district needs this help from the top down. I implore you to consider hiring a consultant. It will be money very well spent, and I think you would all be proud. Thank you.
Could you state your address?
Yeah, could you state your address for?
Oh, sure. 135 Lynn Street in Peabody. We are a choice family.
Thank you. Anybody online?
I do not see any hands raised online, but if I could make a process clarifications, this is the first time we're trying to do all this. The plan was to have anybody that wanted to give public comment to be able to do that online, and then we're going to be streaming it through HWCam. And in order for us to present the slides, we're going to have to shut down the Zoom and shift over. So if we have people on the Zoom, we want you to know that it is being streamed by HWCam, and that is where you can find this meeting.
Sure. All right. Then I guess guess we are done with citizens' comments. We're going to skip over the first item A. We will come back to that. We're waiting for a guest to arrive. Are we waiting for guests to arrive on B also, or no?
No.
No. All right. So we'll have the superintendent. Well, actually, why don't we just wait? Why don't we just go to C, and then we'll do the two student things together.
Makes sense.
Okay. So during the budget process this year, there were some discussions about what should be priorities for the school district as far as personnel and restoring some of the items that were necessary to cut last year. And one of those items was the foreign language at the 6th grade level. So that is definitely a discussion, and so we have invited guests here to talk about a process of how we might go about evaluating what is the best way to offer world languages at our school district. And so is Mrs. Sano going to speak first, or?
She is. So
Great, super.
it is
Thank you.
my pleasure to introduce our 6 through 12 curriculum coordinator for world language, Kevin Sano, who is going to present her analysis of our current programming.
So can you make this like
I absolutely
present?
can.
Okay.
Give me 1 minute.
Whew. It's been quite a day. All right, and I will try to project through this mask of mine. Okay, I got to put my glasses on so I can see now. All right, so good evening and thank you for giving me this time. I'm here tonight to present the dilemma that we are facing with regards to world language and to make a recommendation based on my 32 years of experience in world language teaching and 30 in this district. Before you make a judgment, I ask that you hear me out. My goal for this presentation is to recommend that we work to restore the 6th grade world language program as soon as possible so another group of students won't miss out on the opportunity to start their language journey in the 6th grade. Slide 2. Next slide. So you're going to be my slide person, right?
I'm your person.
Okay, so I'm just going to go next slide. Okay. Okay. As I begin, I think it's important to understand the history of world languages in our district. I've stated on several occasions that I am an institutional historian. In the past, there have been decisions made without ever asking about or understanding our history. I was hired in 1991 when language enrollments began to shift from French to Spanish. Next slide. Shortly after I was hired, the planning and work for a K-12 program was started. It was really forward thinking at the time, and I was so excited to be working in a district that valued world language. The committee was comprised of the department head at the time, building principals, language teachers, parents, and other community members. It was a very thorough and detailed process. Regretfully, in cleaning out my desk in the spring, I threw away the findings report and the detailed plan. Boy, how stupid was I. Next slide. In 1998, after 3 years of planning, we started the implementation to add 1 grade level each year. French and Spanish were introduced in all 3 elementary schools in the 5th grade, and that was in 1998. Next slide. 1999, expansion and excitement continued as we expanded the program into the 4th grade. Next slide. In 2000, the budget problems began, and our program was systematically reduced, starting with the 4th grade. Next slide. 2001, the budget problems continued, and we cut 5th grade language. Next slide. In 2003, in 2003, we should have fully implemented our K-12 program, but instead, we lost our entire middle school program on an override. The loss of the program forced middle school teachers to move to the high school or out of district. We then lost young teachers we had trained and mentored because they lost their jobs to riffing. Some teachers were close to retirement and had to change buildings. Parents, devastated by the loss, raised funds, and we were able to partially restore some programming. In late August, we were frantically trying to hire a French and a Spanish teacher. We hired teachers, but not the best teachers, as they had already been hired in other districts. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide, please.
Just, let's see, oops.
Oh, whoop.
Slides. There we go.
Too fast, too fast.
There we go.
Nope, I think we're back one.
More?
There we go. Okay. In 2004, due to the inability to find a quality French teacher, because at that time language teachers were very hard to come by, and they still are, the decision was made to cut the French program. Not my decision. The loss of our feeder program led to the reduction and phase out of our high school French program. The French teachers who had moved to the high school after the override loss transitioned to Spanish if they were duly certified, or to English. Over a period of 5 years, we transitioned our programming to one language, to Spanish. As each class graduated, the French program was phased out. Next slide. 2005. When the program was reintroduced after the loss in the override, we offered Spanish 3 times a week. There were so many cuts that year, students didn't have enough choices to fill their schedule. So Spanish became a core subject area, and we saw students 5 times a week. At that time, we were one of the only middle schools in Massachusetts to offer world language daily for students 6th through 8th grade. We began to rebuild, and I taught at both the middle school and the high school. I taught 6th grade, and I taught 10th grade. And I had a pair of siblings, a 6th grader and a 10th grader, and it was quite an experience. Next slide.
Seems to keep getting stuck. Let's see.
Next slide.
I'm trying. Keep hitting the buttons, not much is happening.
Okay.
Let's,
No, we're way ahead.
Now we have to go back.
Okay, we're in 2008 now.
There we
Okay,
go.
in 2008, we tried unsuccessfully to add back a language. The superintendent at the time wanted to create a classics program, and we added Latin or tried to add it. There was no additional budget. We reallocated our French sections to Latin. Latin teachers are very hard to find and even harder to retain, so after our first year, the Latin teacher left. It was a part-time position, and Mrs. Sprouse, who's a current Spanish teacher, taught Latin as we transitioned once again back to Spanish. There were less than 30 students in that program. Next slide. 2009, 2010. The students in the Latin program completed a 2nd year of Latin with Mrs. Sprouse, teaching Latin 2, one section. Parents insisted on a 3rd year, so in 2010, Mrs. Sprouse again taught a small group of juniors Latin 3. Mrs. Sprouse did a lot of work to create lesson plans and to stay a few days ahead of her students while at the same time teaching her Spanish classes. Next slide. 2005 to 2014. For nearly a decade, realizing there would never be any additional funds as our district has struggled with the budget, I worked with my Spanish teachers to build the best program possible. Over the next decade, we wrote all of our own curriculum, as textbooks were a luxury we could not afford. We transitioned our teaching from grammar-based to proficiency-driven, and we implemented the seal of biliteracy. Our program was thriving with 2 AP offerings and many students going on to major or minor in Spanish in college. We have several testimonials from former students as to the quality of our program and the impact it has had on them. Next slide. 2014, the decision to add a 2nd offering, Mandarin, was made by the superintendent. There was never a discussion, but it came down as a directive. An anonymous donation of $90,000 was made to the Ed Fund with the stipulation that it be used to start a non-traditional language. No additional funds or budget were provided, and sections were added each year by reallocating sections from Spanish to Mandarin. With the addition of each grade level, the Spanish curriculum had to be reconfigured to reflect the loss of learning time in 6th grade. Each year, we adjusted to accommodate Mandarin. The first year we had Mandarin, we had a lottery to select 50 students to start the program. Those first students are now seniors. Of the 50 that started the program, there are 23 students in Mandarin 5 allocated across 2 sections. The reduction of our Spanish program then created a ripple effect, having to readjust our curriculum each year as Mandarin was added to our offerings. Can I just grab my water for a sec? Thank you. Okay. We are on next slide, slide 15.
Oh, I don't know what the delay is here. Give it a minute.
I don't know, it's okay. Give me time to breathe.
Yeah, I know. Have some water.
Have some water, breathe. Okay, I don't know where that
I don't
slide
know
is,
what
but
this-
there is a slide.
It's loading.
Loading.
Ah,
Okay, I don't think that's the right slide, though.
doesn't look
That's,
here.
go back one. Okay, 2020, last spring. Oh, okay, last spring, last year. Last year, we lost our 6th grade world language program. Prior to the school committee vote last year, I spoke to Dr. Kuchenberger about ways we could save 6th grade language. Needless to say, it wasn't a priority, and I know there are so many things on your plate. I found out about the possibility of the loss of our world language program on the budget slide the night it was presented. Next slide. And we've lost our program. April 2021. Where are we now? How do we restore a program without a budget? I ask you these questions as I prepare to make a recommendation and support my recommendation with data. Is it time to reallocate our limited resources to restore a program for our 6th graders? Okay. Data to support. So how do we reinstate a program lost to a budget cut? What are our priorities as to how we spend the limited dollars we do have allocated to our subject area? I'm going to present data to support my recommendation to reinstate 6th grade Spanish. Next slide. Trends in Mandarin enrollment. Over the years, enrollment in Mandarin is trending down. Many students switch language from Mandarin to Spanish upon entering high school. Some students leave the district. There are currently 8 students in the 8th grade looking to attend school elsewhere. Many students drop Mandarin after 10th grade, having met the 2-year minimum requirement because it's too hard and they're not meeting proficiency benchmarks. Many students have switched after freshman year or midway through 10th grade because they don't feel successful and were unhappy. This causes an increase in Spanish 1 classes with upperclassmen in an entry-level course. It also causes us to use our limited sections to give students an opportunity to start over. Next slide.
Wait for it.
It's coming. Our current numbers. I realize we're in a pandemic. I realize our numbers are impacted by that. However, the Mandarin numbers continue to decline each year. When we first started the program, we had to hold a lottery because there were more students interested than seats. Maintaining 2 languages is a balancing act. In the middle school, we allocate 2 sections to Mandarin and 4 sections to Spanish. When the numbers don't balance, it creates inequalities for both students and teachers. Next slide. This is what happens when you can't use your mouth to change papers, too. All right, next slide. The same thing happens at the high school, trending down. Next slide. This year, looking at the student-teacher ratio, our resources are not equitably distributed between the different languages offered. At both levels, our Spanish teachers have a substantially higher workload. The middle school, it's 58-1 for Mandarin and 97.2-1 for Spanish teachers. At the high school, it's 63.75-1 and 80.25-1. If the Mandarin positions were converted to Spanish positions, the overall student-to-teacher ratio could be 83.2-1 for middle and 75.1 for the high school. Not only is the teacher workload impacted, but Spanish students are also impacted as they have much larger classes. And how do I explain to a 7th grade Spanish student why they are in a class of 23 when the 7th grade Mandarin class is 6? Next slide. We also need to look at the outcomes of language study. Language instruction at Hamilton Wenham has evolved. Those watching may remember their language classes as grammar-focused, and many might say, I took 4 years of language and I can't remember anything. As we rebuilt our language program, I also led the department through a transition from grammar-driven instruction to proficiency-driven instruction. What do we mean by proficiency? The ability to use language in real-world situations in a spontaneous interaction and non-rehearsed context in a manner acceptable and appropriate to a native speaker of that language. Each grade has a targeted proficiency level with the ultimate goal of qualifying for the seal of biliteracy. And how do we determine proficiency? Initially, the AP Spanish exam was used to determine proficiency. However, now we offer our students the opportunity to take the STAMP test, which is a standards-based measurement of proficiency test. And why is this important? Because in November of 2017, the seal of biliteracy was signed into law. High school seniors who can demonstrate proficiency in English and a second language are awarded, upon graduation, the seal of biliteracy, meaning they have achieved intermediate high or advanced low proficiency in 2 languages, English and a second language. And Hamilton Wenham, we were ready, and we awarded seals right out of the starting gate in a pilot program. Next slide. So, here are some results of this is what the data looks like, the STAMP data, and this is the 8th grade. So prior to the STAMP test, we annually gave the National Spanish exam to students 8th through 10th grade. The last time we gave the National Spanish exam was in 2017, and we had 101 students take the test, with over half of them receiving medals. We then piloted the STAMP test that same year in 8th grade and 10th grade. We had a 20-30 split in both languages, with 50 students in each grade taking the test. The 10th graders that took the STAMP are currently seniors. The 8th graders are currently 10th graders. So that's just some data. So move on. Next slide. The data you see here is our senior class, and you can see the 10th grade. This is the 10th grade as, you know, when they were 10th graders, they're now seniors. Okay, so you can see here, below here is, and why do we have 2 of these? Because there were 2 Spanish teachers and they were separate groups. So these are the Mandarin scores. Yellow means that you're in the novice, green you're in the intermediate. When you get into blue, it gets higher. So you can see the different colors, okay? Next slide. Comparing results, this is the 10th grade. So this year I offered the STAMP again. I gave the STAMP in the end of November, beginning of December to seniors who opted to take it. I also gave them an opportunity to retest, or students who didn't want to take it in the fall just took it again in the spring. So you can see these are the Spanish results, these are the Mandarin results. And if you look at the composite scores, it's almost 2 levels higher. And here you can see they're broken down. So for you to get the seal of biliteracy, you need to have 6s across the board. Okay, the seal is awarded by getting a 6 in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Next slide, please. All right. I think this is slide 26. So all students can take the test if they choose to do so. Go back one. Okay, I invited seniors, regardless of language, to test for the seal. However, only 18 chose to test in Spanish, and I think there were 15 in Mandarin. Some have retested. So next slide. So here are the results over the years of the seal of biliteracies that have been awarded by our district. So the pilot was in 2017. That same year, we gave the National Spanish exam to students, but I also piloted the students here that received the seal, received that because they scored 4s and 5s in AP Spanish language as juniors. All right, so 36 seals were then awarded the next year to the graduating class. We also had one student who chose to take the STAMP test in Polish, because you don't have to have the language taught at the school. Anybody who has a native language can take the STAMP or take an equivalent test. So this young man spoke Polish at home. He took the STAMP test, and he qualified, and we awarded him the seal of biliteracy because he met the MCAS scores. The following year, you can see we had, for Spanish, we had students, 24 total. So the seal is divided into the seal of biliteracy and then the seal with distinction. To get the seal with distinction, that means you have achieved an intermediate low level of proficiency. So that's 7s across the board. And so, and you can see in 1819, we awarded 27 seals in Spanish, 9 of those with distinction. The following year, you can see we have 11 and 9, a total of 19. And here we are, fast forward, 2021. These are the students that took the stamp either in the fall, meaning late November, early December, or just took it March 31st. And in taking that, we have 15 students that qualified that will get the seal, 1 with distinction. We have 1 in German, 1 in Korean, and there is 1 pending, possibly in Mandarin. They're going to do another retest of 1 section. But the students that you see Korean and German, they are triliterate because they also are awarded the seal in Spanish. Next slide. It's coming. Transfer goals. So when we worked on our transfer goals, and I know that you're talking about the portrait of the graduate, the vision for all of our graduates must include or should include the seal of biliteracy or biliteracy to ensure they are competitive with their peers around the world. All of our students need access to world language, and it needs to start early. Next slide. So, given the interruption in learning due to COVID, compounded by our budgetary restraints and the challenges students face meeting proficiency goals, it is my recommendation that we phase out Mandarin at both the middle and the high school. If we were to reallocate resources, we would be able to strengthen an already high-quality program that has proven results and bring language learning back to our 6th grade students without increasing the budget. Next slide. It's my recommendation that we reinstate 6th grade Spanish by reallocating our current FTEs. So I thank you for your time, and I bid you adieu. Thank you. I'll answer any questions you have. It's not Spanish.
Do you want me to do the process one and then ask questions, or have?
I think we need to do the process one, because that was not what I was expecting to hear tonight.
Want me to stay up there to answer questions?
Yes.
Afraid of that.
Kevin loved nods.
No, I typically when up here, my knees are knocking, and many of you probably don't know that, but I'm usually shaking. I'm fairly composed today. It must have been that run with those 8th graders after school. Okay, I'm ready. Fire away.
Are we going to do the second part of this, which is the process of what to do with this, or recommendation?
Do you want to do that first, and then I'm sure people
Yeah,
have
'cause I think
questions for Kevin.
I think it all goes together.
Yeah, let me
Okay.
switch over to that. Kevin, you get a little bit of a breather here.
So is Dave not here?
No, he
'Cause he was a former student of mine.
maybe he was intimidated by that. Maybe he was intimidated by that.
Well, I was going to ask him what he remembered in Spanish. I don't remember what year he graduated, but we have we've transitioned, quite a bit. It's very different. And I know I had both the Alara boys. I'm actually on the 2nd generation, I'm afraid to say.
So the other second part of this presentation is to talk a little bit about process after Ms. Sano has just beautifully laid out the dilemma in front of the district, that there has been numerous attempts in this district to have 2 languages. There are ongoing budget questions and what that means for outcomes for kids. The other thing that we see around this is that there's been a lot of starts and stops with different types of ways to try to solve this problem. So with the administrative team, we talked about how do we best move forward with this, and this is the recommendation that we are putting forth. The slides will shift. So So we are recommending that the district set up a world language study group for the fall of 2021. And to survey the community regarding their vision for world language in the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School District. We've talked a lot about the need for vision and planning as a district, and this is another example of getting really clear and building a community consensus about what world language could and should look like in the Hamilton-Wenham School District. The study group would also have the opportunity to review best practice and to draft a vision for world language in the Hamilton-Wenham School District. And the idea here would be that the study group would come back to the committee to make a formal recommendation to the school committee by November 2021, so that it is prior to the beginning of the fiscal year 23 budget development process, so that we can take into consideration the recommendations and start to budget appropriately based on careful analysis. So again, this process recommendation is trying to address the various flip-flopping that has occurred and to look deeply at the options available to the district and to give the community an opportunity to weigh into their thinking about this issue and to have that information in front of the committee before it looks at the fiscal 23 budget. So you have heard the dilemma, the problem, the recommendation of our curriculum coordinator for world language, and you've heard our recommendation in terms of process. And with that, we will turn it over to the committee for any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you. Peter?
I have a number of comments and a number of questions. This is a topic that I'm deeply passionate about. If we really want to have an innovative district, we should be introducing language earlier, not later. We should have one of my visions is to have a model like Milton, which is a go-to district. Parents seek out Milton from around the country to have their children immersed in a language, in an academic subject early. One of my questions is, can we do this through attrition? I know we can't just go out and buy a whole new staff, but as teachers retire, can we replace them with a teacher who's bilingual and can teach a subject matter in a foreign language? Can we do that? Was one.
Do I have an answer of that? That's always been my vision as well. In Milton, for those of you who don't know, it's a complete immersion French program. We had the vision of K-12 language, and had I been we should be K-12. There's no reason we can't be K-12. So my recommendation would be, put back 6th grade and like you said, Peter, to look to hire biliterate teachers. And if we are graduating seniors who are biliterate, there's more biliteracy in the workforce. But it is, unfortunately, there's not a lot of language teachers out there. So we do need to find ways to hire. I know there's someone in one of the elementary teachers who does a little French and is adding French to their classroom.
Mrs. Pinciaro.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's wonderful. And so. I do have a lot of ideas about how can we make this happen with our seniors. I shared one this morning with Craig and with Eric, like I'm having a brain fart here. But there are just so many things that we could do if we think out of the box. And we need to think out of the box here in Hamilton-Wenham because we have never had a budget. So it's time to get creative, and how can we solve this?
I would argue that the language has always been treated like a slush fund. When we need it, we just draw from it, we cut language, we add something else. But language needs to be a priority, not just a nice to have. It needs to be a need to have.
And definitely.
And I see the benefits. We're in a bilingual household. I've been speaking French for 25 years. My daughter, who's 10, who we speak French at home, she corrects my French all the time. She's only 9. So the importance of introducing language earlier is critical. We can't just keep cutting it. I didn't realize we were in this graveyard spiral, went back this far. We've just been cutting in all these critical programs.
And no one-
We cut. Now we've lost sixth grade. Now are we going to lose more? I didn't realize the graveyard spiral went back this far.
Well, because no one has really ever asked about the institutional history, and I think that is really important. And you're losing the institutional history with every teacher in this district that retires or chooses to leave, because we need to have a voice. And I have tried on numerous occasions to share this, but I was shut down. We're not interested in that, was the last response that I had. So it's important to have language for our students, and believe me, I would love to have multiple choices for our students, but that has never been our reality. So as someone who has given my whole career is here at Hamilton, but I'm not just in Hamilton Wenham. For those of you who don't know, I am really connected with the Massachusetts Association of Foreign Language Teachers. I was the president of all of the Eastern Massachusetts language administrators. I am talking all the time with district leaders around Massachusetts about where they are in their language instruction, and we have been on the forefront. Schools come to us to see what are we doing with proficiency. So we train them, and guess what happens? We send them out to other districts because we're not able to maintain our language program. And it's frustrating for me. And I want to leave here knowing that this community is committed to building a strong language program. And we have to do it backwards. And if we have to do it in one language, let's do it in one language, but let's be great and let's do it well. And then after you have 8 years of language study, well, then maybe we can say, like, we got to find the money to offer our kids more. But to just say, oh, let's just do the language du jour or of the year, it's frustrating. And I have to be honest, because I've struggled with this. It keeps me up at night. And I thank you for hearing me and for letting me share about where we've been in this district. Because I was thinking about it the other night. I've worked under 8 superintendents in my 30 years here. 6 principals at the high school and 4 at the middle school. So you can understand where the challenges lie.
I'm sorry. Can I keep going? I'm really excited about the proficiency-driven instruction because I'm one of those students who took Spanish for 6 years, couldn't speak a word of it. I went and lived in France for 5 years, and I came back highly proficient. We watched the news in French, go to the theater in French, watch the movies in French. I was speaking to a French teacher recently. This French teacher was not able to communicate in French. Knows the grammar, knows the rules, but could not communicate. I had some other ideas I had a couple of questions. One about, you said phasing out Mandarin, but also, have we thought about reaching out to other governments about, I know the French government is prepared to give money to school districts to help fund.
We're really not at that point right now.
Language, no?
You know, down the road, next year, I think looking for funding and grants and things like that, that's something to look at. But for right now, that's not where we're at.
But a long-term solution,
yes.
We could bring students from, we used to have a program with Angers.
Yes, we did, and that was created by, but that doesn't solve our problem tonight.
Right, but I'm thinking long-term, we could have
Right.
French people come in. But I had one question about phasing out Mandarin. Does that mean the students who are taking Mandarin now would be able to continue?
Yes, anytime when we phased out French, we didn't just say, oh, see you later, that's it. No, a phase out means that so the last class that's enrolled in Mandarin, we see them through graduation.
Right.
We don't just cut them off at the knees.
So they can continue, any student in Mandarin now.
Yes, and so like when we did the phase out for French, there was no feeder program, so the 8th graders went to the high school, and with each consecutive year, the teacher that we had, she was certified all in French. She's triliterate, French, German, and she transitioned from French to English. So one year it was 4 sections of French, 1 English, then it was 3 and 2, and then eventually it was 1 section of French, 4 sections of English, and she ended her career in Hamilton Wenham teaching English.
And I just have one more question, one more comment.
Okay, one more, because then you're done.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your patience.
Dinner's waiting at home.
Oh, yeah. Well, one thing, it said the proficiency benchmarks, students are dropping out because they're not meeting the proficiency benchmarks. Is that also because it's hurting their college applications?
I can't answer that. I'm not the student, and that's a personal decision, and so I'm not going to comment on that.
And my last comment is about the process. I don't think we need a survey. I think the data shows the answer to what parents are thinking. Parents are dropping, or students and parents are dropping out of Mandarin in high numbers later on. So I think that we don't need a survey to let parents know what we're thinking. They've already voted with their choices. I don't think we need to have a survey and draw this out. I think we should be bold. We should say we want to be a visionary district. We should introduce language earlier. We should make a decision for this upcoming year, and not, put this in committee for the next 2 years. I just think that's a waste of time. It's doing a disservice to two cohorts or multiple cohorts of students. I think we should make a decision and to say this is what we want as a district. We want to be innovative. Let's make this a priority. We have the data. The data's there. It's telling us, not what people are going to do in the future. It's already told us what they're doing. Thank you for your patience.
Julia, do you have?
No, I don't have any questions.
Dana's hand was raised before me.
Yeah, Dana and Anna were.
Let's go around.
Yeah, just go ahead.
Just quick question, Ms. Sano. Thank you for the presentation. In your conversations with colleagues in Eastern Mass, are there many districts that have one language, or can you just give a
So there are not a lot of districts that have one language. There are some districts, however. The districts that have two languages, their second language is not Mandarin. Mandarin is a non-traditional language. It's a level 3 language. It's a very difficult language to learn. If you were to look at it, 600 hours in Spanish to become proficient, to reach that benchmark of Seal of Biliteracy, versus 1,200. So it's a level 3. So it would take, or it's even more than 1,200. It would literally, I did all the math, it would take, we had language every single day of their high school career, 180 days, 1 hour of language, it would take a Spanish student 3 years to get to the level that it would take a Mandarin student 12 years.
Wow.
Based on the data.
I have personal history with 4 children, 3 took Spanish, 2 minored in college. One who wasn't a great Spanish student is still taking it in college. And my senior, it was a struggle to get him to take Mandarin 5. So we'll see. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Rena.
So I guess it is a question, but I want to, I'm wondering if what Peter said is I agree with what Peter said about the data, that we're seeing really some real evidence and data regarding Mandarin. I think that that's accurate. I also think, or I guess I'm wondering, I'm curious about, to me, I don't want to repeat the pattern of the past, which was to say, let's flip-flop back and forth. So I'm wondering that even though we have this one aspect that seems pretty clear about, to me at least, about Mandarin specifically, it doesn't, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm curious, I'm intrigued by this idea of slowing things down, creating a vision of what we really want. Because I don't want to continue this pattern. And my question to you is, if you, first of all, would you be willing to be, because you would be critical to that group, and if so, if you're willing to be a part of that and do that work, what do you think would be sort of the essential elements of who should be in that group? Not specifically, but how do we get to that vision?
We did all the work years ago, and they threw it out the window.
So, and that's, so that.
And I don't want to repeat that either, because this is not the position that I want. I mean, history is repeating itself. I mean, I tried to put the brakes on this to say, if you do this, this is where we'll be.
Right.
Why don't we take this and put in, we've got 3 elementary schools. Why don't we make one a French school, a Spanish school, a Mandarin school? You know, like, why don't we work there and build it forward? Because you really need to start it younger. And you can start Mandarin in the kindergarten and build it forward. You can start Spanish in the kindergarten and build it forward. But then you'll get in like, well, I want to be at the Spanish school, the Mandarin school. That's not my problem, that's your problem. But, I mean, there are lots of things that we should be doing differently, because, yes, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in this position again, but I'm in this position because no one looks at the institutional history. They come in and they're like, well, this is what we're going to do. And believe me, I tried to say, hey, wait, and I was told, we're not here to talk about this.
So I guess, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I guess that was sort of what I was saying, is what I just heard you say is exactly what I would dream that this group could talk about, because what you're talking about there is like, could we start at a kindergarten? Could we start 2? There's a whole variety of things that could happen.
Right.
That group, and so and I'm sorry to, can I ask one more question about that? So you
Only get 3 each.
Yeah, sorry. You did that visioning process in, I think you said.
1999.
Right.
95 we started it,
Right,
and we
did that
implemented it.
visioning process. What, and you may not know the answer to this question, but I want to put it out there because I think we need to put it out first, is that what structures do we need to put in place to allow the vision, once it's created, to be held so deeply by everyone that it isn't just written down and then lost? Like, what do you see that happened? And it's a very complicated question, I know.
It is a complicated question, but it goes back to Peter saying it. It's like, you know, it's like the icing on the cake. It's like, oh, well, we don't really need this. But, I mean, it needs to be, when you think about the future of our graduates, if you are not multilingual, you are, you know, our country is, our society is global. Everybody is multiliterate except for Americans. I want our students to be multiliterate. At the very least, they should be biliterate. And we need to start creating opportunities for that. And we have to get over this, that like, oh, well, I'm not going to speak Spanish, or I'm not going to speak this. Like, we need to make that a priority for our students. And we need to embrace this, and we need to model this, and we need to all be, you know, not be ready to say, like, the first thing we're going to cut is going to be world languages, and it always is that. Because they think it's, you know, it's like frivolous. And I don't think you think it's frivolous, but it's always the first to go. I mean, I view world language as the icing on the cake. We can do world language in any discipline. You know, if you want to learn math, I can teach math, you know, math facts to a kindergarten in the target language. Math is math. It doesn't matter what language it is.
So would it be fair, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would it be fair to say that one of the things we could do would be, when we're doing our strategic planning, to be certain that that voice is heard specifically in a strategic plan?
I definitely think when you do the portrait of a graduate again, if it does not include biliteracy, then you are doing a disservice to the students of this district. Biliteracy has to be part of that vision.
Thank you.
And it can be any language. Biliteracy does not have to be Spanish. It can be any language, but it has to be attainable for our students. They have to know that they can achieve it. And it's hard for our students to achieve it in Mandarin. They can achieve it in French or Spanish, in a Romance language. And then once they get the taste of that first language, it's easy to learn a second or a third language. And I, you know, personally, when we had our French and Spanish program, there were students that took both French and Spanish. And then we had students that went off. I remember a young woman, she went off and did her junior year in China. So, you know, they develop that passion for language, and they feel successful, and then they go off and they continue down that path where they become multiliterate. And there are a lot of students, there are a lot of graduates who I know personally who are doing that.
My wife speaks 6 languages because she grew up in that environment of being
But
multilingual.
you don't have to grow up in Europe to speak languages.
Right.
You can grow up in Hamilton, Wenham, and you can be biliterate, or you can be triliterate, as we already have 2 examples, because there are many students in our district who speak other languages at home, and we need to recognize that as that is really awesome. So I sent out an email to all of the senior class to say, if you speak a different language at home, come take a test to qualify for the seal of biliteracy. I didn't hear from a lot of people, but I know that they're out there. We have Portuguese speakers, we have Greek speakers, we have lots of Korean, we have Vietnamese. They just need to be proud of that heritage language and come and say, I am biliterate. It doesn't have to happen in our schools. They can be triliterate. But it just has to be something that it needs to be on the forefront, and we all need to make it a priority. It can't be something that is the first thing that we list as a line item on a budget. So.
Anna?
Agreed.
Thank you, Michelle. I have several comments and a couple questions. I want to start off, though, by acknowledging and saying thank you to you, Ms. Sano, to have the gift of a teacher who's been here this long, especially as a newer committee member and a newer resident to Hamilton. I just think it's important to recognize, that's a treasure that you're offering to us. So I just want to say thank you for sharing all of your years of service. But in this particular moment, coming back up to the plate again, and I sense and feel in your presentation and in your words a real sense of frustration that we're back at it again. So I want to acknowledge that. As I'm listening to my committee members, I agree with a lot of what some other people have said, but I have a couple other observations. I completely agree with Peter. I feel like the answer is quite self-evident for next year. I do not think we need to have more process or visioning or to learn about best practices. It sounds as though you know the best practices. You are advising other districts of best practices. So I kind of feel like we have the answer right in front of us, and that's a gift we should utilize. I also think that when I've heard from parents, I've heard 2 very persistent refrains. One of them is, we need more language early. They want language back at the 6th grade level or earlier, if possible. I've also heard that a lot of parents really do love Mandarin, and they recognize that it's hard and that we should not be afraid to do hard things. However, it's quite clear from the evidence that part of the reason it's difficult for us is because we start it so late. So I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater in the long term. However, to me, it's quite clear the immediacy of next year's budget says that we need to reset and focus, because the ROI on this particular path of Mandarin that we're choosing is not really working. So I would fully support reintroducing 6th grade language and a sole language for next year and redevelop what it looks like next. And I think Dana is right that that should be part of a broader strategic planning process. I do not think it needs a special study group. But the thing I'm going to say, and this is going to be really unpopular, so I'm going to say it anyway, because that's my brand, apparently. The thing that strikes me about the cyclical nature is that this is clearly not a priority for this district, and it never has been. And I think back on other districts that I've admired, either as a student or as a parent or friends of parents, people across the country. They really do. They have more languages, and they start them earlier. And they recognize a lot of the things that you were just saying about global citizenry and the cultural benefit of recognizing another culture. Even if you start in high school and continue into college, that's a value proposition. And what's interesting to me is here we are struggling to barely provide, 2 languages, 1.5. And I mean no disrespect to the sporty families in the world. I'm a sports person. We have 17 sports at the high school. I just did the count based on I went back to the presentation. I love sports more than anyone. But to me, we are out of balance because we are not churning out professional athletes left and right. I'm not saying sports aren't valuable, but we are meant to be a comprehensive high school, and we spend a lot of money and a lot of time providing a ton of variety in one aspect of our curriculum, and we're very, very monolithic in another. So that's, to me, a set of that strategic planning process is we need to look and say, are we actually serving all the students of our district equitably? And I would say a 17-to-1 ratio doesn't make me feel great. Similarly, and this is somewhat unrelated, it's bothersome to me that we don't have an orchestra program. That's another aspect of our curriculum that's just non-existent, and in terms of band and choir offerings. So I really agree with Dana. Like, we need to talk about the kind of district that we want to be, and how are we serving students from a variety of disciplines. I'm not saying I want to get rid of sports. Everyone knows I love sports. But we're out of balance. And I think the reason that we've never been able to find a viable financial path for languages is they've never been seen as part of this holistic grouping of students in Hamilton Wenham. What can they do? They can do music, they can do art, they can do sports, they can do languages, they could do foreign exchange programs. I think Peter's not completely off there, you know, but we have to sit down and talk about that in a holistic way, and I do think that has to be part of our planning. But I personally fully support your recommendation, which is vested in 30 years of knowledge, that we need to go back and reset the table. I know powerfully, as the parent of a 6th grader, that it really hurt not to have 6th grade foreign language. I personally do not want to inflict that wound on another class of students. So I'm somewhat mindful that I want to protect the language opportunity for these 2 grades. I do not want to abandon our current Mandarin speakers, and so I'm elated to hear that we wouldn't do that.
We would never do that.
And that's great, but I personally think your recommendation is solidly based in knowledge and data and experience, and I think we should listen to you. And I think then, as we look forward to the portrait of the graduate and strategic planning, we need to talk about what does this district look like and evaluate where we're spending money, because we're losing not only staff in disciplines to other districts, we're losing students. If you're a student in this district who wants to play the violin and take French, which is a perfect, reasonable expectation in a high-profile district, our district doesn't support that student. That student is incentivized to leave the district because we don't offer either of those things. And to me, in a Tony town like Hamilton Wenham, to not have those, to me, those are basic skill sets, and I think everyone can appreciate the lifelong pursuit of language and culture and the lifelong joy of music are much more sort of long-term holistic benefits we provide our students, and I think we have to counter those within the framework of sports and technology and all the other things we want to do. So.
And I agree with you, and we have some really outstanding Mandarin teachers, and if it weren't for their abilities, the program wouldn't be where it is at all, and it's because of their commitment, and they're great teachers. It would be a shame to see us just throw out the program, but what if we were to say, let's build a K-12? Because yes, it's viable then, and then the kids can attain that. I mean, I really think that, you know, you've got the 3 elementary schools. We need to get language into the elementary schools, and it doesn't have to be just one language, but you got to have a plan, and you have to make a commitment to it. And I know that there's elementary parents out there that want that for their children.
Well, and I think as it pertains
but how
to...
do you do that? It's your budget.
Yep.
It's, you know, I'm just asking that you recognize that we need to do something. We need to reallocate. We need to bring back 6th grade, and then we need to find a way to bring it back K-12. And if it starts one language, or you make a commitment to say, hey, let's stick with Mandarin, because I agree with you, Dana, I don't want to keep flip-flopping. It's not fair to the community. It's not fair to the teachers. It's not fair to the kids. But it has to start in the earlier grades for it to be viable for them to really attain it, rather than, you know, I think about, like, you know, my investment in time. I want something for that. So you've invested 6 years in Mandarin, and what do you have for it? Nothing for most of them. You know, so let's make it something that they're going to invest their time in, they're going to attain it, and they're all going to be successful to walk away from it. And I want our district to have multiple languages. But right now, we need to bring it back to 6th grade, and we need to have a plan for moving forward.
Well, and I would just offer that one of the things that's sort of on the fringe of what we're talking about, it's not at the core, but it's peripheral, is the idea that we're talking about cultural inclusion. We're talking about cultural proficiency. We're talking about diversity and equity. This is a really bona fide way to bring that into our worldview of the students, to think of themselves holistically that way. So, and I think one of the things and I think that's a statement of our values. Who are we as a district? I do want to put a plug in for something you said, and I experienced personally with Rebecca Pinciaro at Cutler. My daughter had the great luck of having her for first grade, and she had French Fridays, and she did exactly the thing you did. She taught about colors, she taught about animals, she taught about structures, and she did it in French, and it was a hoot, and it wasn't that difficult, actually. And so I feel like if we, to some degree, reshape the way we're thinking about language instruction as a more holistic prophecy of part of the student picture, it was great. I will tell you, the other parents were so jealous, and it was because we cultivated that, and she was allowed to sort of be supportive. And as you said, my daughter now knows her colors in 2 languages, and she learned that because of this one teacher and this one happy incident, and it was great. So if we can cultivate that in terms of our staff recruitment, I think that's great.
And that's the difference. That's what proficiency is. It's flipping the attitude to, oh, I can't do languages, to here's what I can do. And your daughter is can do her colors, so that's how we try to frame our language teaching now is, we're teaching you this, so this is what you can do with it. So you don't have to be afraid of the target language, and that's the thing, when you hear it, they get it. It's like, just kind of, you have to be uncomfortable at first, but then you get it, and they learn their colors because they're seeing it, and they're going to learn their math facts, whether it's in Spanish or French, they can see that, or whatever language it is.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a question? Yeah. First off, thanks for coming and presenting tonight. I just have one question. If the committee decides to move forward with your recommendation, how long would it take to phase out Mandarin? Is it 6 years or?
So currently there are 23 7th graders in Mandarin. So they move forward to 8th grade, and then, so I would say 5 years. So with each graduating class, the difficulty becomes in maintaining a part-time Mandarin teacher to see that through. It was a little bit easier in French because our French teacher was able to transition to teaching English. But if you were able to take this vision of K-12 language and put Mandarin in an elementary school, then you phase it out and phase it in, right? And you hang on to these teachers that we have trained and mentored because they are proficient in proficiency. And there are many schools, even some of our neighboring schools, who are not offering the seal of biliteracy to our students, who are not teaching to proficiency. And for the teachers that we have trained, and I have trained a number of teachers, 2 of them are currently in Newburyport Middle School, and they are transforming their program because they were trained in proficiency instruction. And when I said we didn't have a budget for textbooks, that was one of the best things that happened to us, because a textbook is not proficiency driven. We wrote all our own curriculum. We always write our own curriculum, and it's all proficiency based. So any other questions?
Yep, it's more of a comment, but a vision created in 1995 is a vision created in 1995. When I moved here in 1995, I had a vision of what my family and my life would look like here, and it is nothing like that.
I'm sorry.
The people who live here now are not the people who lived here then. So to say that that vision would have any bearing on what the community wants today it's just not true. So if we want to have a vision or know what the vision is, I think we do need to have a process where we do ask the community, because just like you, I've lived through the years when, you had an override and French was cut. You had, no only Spanish and people begging for more languages. So I feel like part of our issue it's been driven by haste, and I was here when the decision was made to have a second language. And then it was, as you said, in the dark of night, decided by one person what it would be. So we really need to have...
I just want to say that wasn't me.
And I'm not saying it was you. I think you said who it was, and I agree with you. But I think what we need is we need to know is the community committed to language or not? Is the community committed to choice in language or not? Because that is how we don't get the flip-flop, is we have a commitment. And right now, we don't have that information. So I look forward to us having a little more discussion about the process, and I look forward to you being here another year to go through that process with us. So thank you very much for coming tonight.
Okay, is that it for questions?
I would just argue, we do have data. We do have data about what.
But we haven't talked to the community.
Yeah,
How
but
can we make a decision without talking to the families that are taking Mandarin and?
Well, I know, but the fact that they're opting out of this language.
We have to talk to them, though. I feel strongly that we have to talk.
I think you have to talk to the entire
community.
Correct.
And I agree with process. I just want the process to be a lot quicker. I think spending a year is a year of loss of another cohort or grade of students. So there has to be, we have to have community buy-in. We need to ask elementary parents what they want to do. Believe me, I'm not looking to upset Mandarin parents or anything. I am about language study, but I want it, we lost a 6th grade program. We have to find a way to get it back, and if you don't have the budget, then we need to look at how do we reallocate. So that's my parting words, okay?
Thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
so our special guest, our special guest has arrived.
Michelle,
So we will
can I'm sorry for.
I think we're moving on.
Well, that's my question, is I thought the purpose of this conversation was to provide some direction as to what we're doing. That was where the last time we left it.
Yeah, I guess what's the next step?
I think the next step is you're going to create a committee to advise, right?
Yeah, you know, if the committee wants to weigh in, from my perspective, what we've shared with you is our recommendation, that we, at this point, do not feel like we would be in a position to make any change next year, because to do so would start to eliminate Mandarin immediately. And to give the community an opportunity to weigh in, to be thoughtful, to try to create this vision, and I think there's some nice synergy with the portrait of a graduate, you know, and some of these things that we're talking about that are so critical for a district to know where it's headed and what its vision is for students. This is certainly something that will also come up in the portrait of a graduate work. So we are recommending that the district move forward with a study group in the fall, and the critical timeline here is that we have feedback in place so that when we look at the fiscal year 23 budget, we can start to plan for that. So if the committee wants to take a vote around that process, that would be helpful to know that that is where you want to head. We would not at this time recommend making changes at this moment.
So I have a clarifying question a little bit for just in thinking through this. So I agree that it has to be part of the conversation. I don't really like the idea of it being an outlier conversation. I feel like it needs to be brought into this larger strategic planning process. And I agree with Julia that we do want to hear from the community. However, by not reinstating 6th grade foreign language for next year, which we have the capacity to do, we're not cutting out anyone who's currently in Mandarin. Everyone who's everyone who's currently in the program will continue to be in the program. By not offering any option at 6th grade, we're actually denying 6th graders of any choice whatsoever. And then after we get through this larger planning process, it could well be that Mandarin is reinstated in some ways. Maybe we do reprioritize our budget. I'm dead serious about this imbalance in terms of what we're spending money on. I think that has to be part of next year's conversation. But to me, it feels really, really powerfully myopic to not reinstate something for 6th grade while we know, we've all just agreed, we need to go through a visioning process. So while we're going through the visioning process, we can reinstate 6th grade language, one language, granted it's not ideal, we can reinstate that for this coming 6th graders, and we haven't hurt the existing Mandarin speakers at all by doing that. But if we don't reinstate sixth grade language, the Mandarin speakers carry on, nothing has changed. So to me, it actually feels really flawed to not do sixth grade language next year in Spanish, consider the possibility that we're phasing out Mandarin, but at the end of this visioning process, it may well be that we don't decide to do that.
Anna, that you're saying the same thing over and over, and that we need to keep with time here, so.
Can I, is there a proper motion that we could table this discussion just for a moment so that we could recognize the student and come back? Is that?
I actually feel like we either need to get to a question and vote, or we need to move on and, so maybe make a motion that we ask the superintendent to give us a report in the fall. Because, I am concerned that we have lots of people in the audience here to provide us reports tonight.
Okay. So the motion.
Could make a motion to table this to a future meeting.
I guess I was hoping to table it for later in this meeting, just out of the acknowledgement that I know we have people here.
You.
Huh?
I said it's up to you.
I don't know if anybody else needs to speak. I just want to make one point, and then I don't know if anybody else.
I feel like I'm requesting that we either have a question.
We either have a motion
or we don't have a question. So are we going to have a motion, or are we not going to have a motion?
I can make a motion.
Yep.
Okay, make a motion.
I move that we reinstate sixth grade foreign language and engage in a strategic plan visioning process about the world language offering in the years to come.
Second.
Wait, I have a question about that, though.
Yeah,
how are we paying for that? That was just my question. That's my only question. I'm totally for that.
By phasing out Mandarin.
No.
So,
Yes.
Julia, what you're asking is exactly what we talked about last week, and is a motion has been made that has had no opportunity for the leadership team to evaluate it and to come back to us with a recommendation. So the answer to your question is we don't have the answer to your question, because a motion was made that we're not prepared to answer.
Because when would sixth grade be, I just am concerned about logistics. I mean, I'm totally for sixth grade language, but I don't know how much that would cost, when that would be instated. Are we saying fall?
The last time we talked about this, it was my understanding from both full committee and
Wait a second,
capital.
we're not debating. In order to speak,
Michelle,
you
I'm
need
trying
to
to
be
answer Julia's
recognized.
question.
Correct. We do not talk back and forth. We talk through the chair. You need to be recognized. These are things that we have been talking about. We're supposed to be much more strict and professional in our communication, and that is not it. Okay, so I'm pointing that out. So, Julia has asked a question. Vinny and Mary Beth, how would we pay for that?
Yeah, so the way that would have to occur is that you would have to start phasing out Mandarin. We would have to eliminate a Mandarin teaching position and hire in a Spanish position.
In the fall?
Yes, and it would, at this point, we did meet as a leadership team. We talked about that, and again, the leadership team is recommending that we go through this process in the fall and we maintain things as they are for next year, and to get a vision and then make any kinds of personnel changes or program changes after that work has been done.
Peter.
I guess I'd like to emphasize everything Anna said, echo that, but I also, why do we have to have a separate process about language? Couldn't this be part of the portrait of a graduate process?
Yes,
Why do we have to have a separate process? But we have the ability to make, through our budget, decide what our priority is and add language back to the sixth grade. I've been arguing this for a long time, that we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on professional development and curriculum leadership when a learning management system could do that at a fraction of the price. There's the money right there. But we have the ability to make through our budget as a committee to say this is our priority, getting language back in sixth grade. Otherwise, we've lost two cohorts. It's wholly unequitable. It's yeah. So we can add this to, we can make the choice as a committee to add this to our budget and take from other lesser priorities.
Anybody has anything to add that hasn't already been said? Dana?
No, I move to vote.
All right. I guess we'll vote to vote. So
Can we have the motion repeated?
Well, right now, the motion, I believe, is to end debate and vote. So, let's
I
vote
have one
on
other
ending
thing to say that
debate.
I haven't said. I just feel I feel uncomfortable voting against, like,
So-
voting to shut down a language without talking
So,
to the students and the teachers.
So, we're going to vote on whether or not to vote on the motion. So if you want to vote now, raise your hand.
What motion? Because I think I heard two motions. One was seconded.
There's only
Voting
one
to
motion.
vote.
Okay, so we are voting to vote. Are you opposed to voting to vote? In other words, are you opposed to ending debate?
I'm sorry,
Okay,
I'm
so
still
that
unclear
is
what we're voting.
4-1.
I'm still unclear what we're voting on.
Okay, so now we are voting on the motion. The motion before us is to offer Spanish in the 6th grade next year and to do whatever it takes to do that, which might mean a change in curriculum for other kids.
It would mean
right?
personnel changes.
Okay. So that is what we're voting on.
So,
And so we have voted to take the vote, so that is what we are voting on now. So if you are in favor of
no,
doing that,
point of
raise your
order.
hand.
Point of order. There was a motion and a second. I have one other piece of discussion.
That we
that I
have
have.
voted to vote, so that ends the debate, and we're voting now.
Okay.
So if you would like the motion to pass so that we would reinstitute 6th grade foreign language next year, raise your hand. Okay? All opposed, raise your hand. It's a tie vote, the motion fails. All right. The next order of business is, do we want to have a motion to ask Mary Beth to make a recommendation in the fall? Just want to let that go. Do you need a recommendation? Or?
I just want to say we should never vote against students, and that's what we just did.
I'm sorry. We are not recognized to speak, and I think Dana would like to say something.
I don't think that's fair.
I think per our protocols, I would like members of the board to recognize that when someone makes a vote, it is with the assumption, I hold the assumption that every person on this board took that vote by thinking first about what they felt was in the best interest of the students of Hamilton Wenham. And that I know that that is what I did, and I believe with all of my heart that it is what everyone here did. And if we vote differently, it is because we are a group of people who look at a wide variety of things and see things differently, and there is value in that. And it is, in my opinion, not appropriate to assume that anyone's vote was intended to be not in the interest of children. If I'm allowed, I'd like to move to the next item of business.
We'll let Anna speak, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Michelle. I just had a clarifying question for Vinnie and Mary Beth then as this moves forward, because the way that we had last left it was that budget-wise, it was a wash for this coming year, either keeping 4th and 6th grade, reinstating 6th grade, or switching out. But I just want to be clear for the public that's listening, because that's a little bit, what you just said about shifting staff and personnel, that's a little bit different than I heard it the last time around. I was under the impression that we were approaching this as sort of a choice between two options, and that we should make them, and we've just done that, right? I mean, we just took a vote, and to Dana's point, I respect the vote. But I just think for clarity, I want to understand the actual FTE, the budget line item to support either option that we could have taken, I thought was the same. there would have been no financial difference one way or the other. It was more of a strategic difference. Is that correct?
Yeah, so you're right that the FTE line item would be the same, but that if you were to reinstate sixth grade language, you would have to bring in a Spanish teacher and remove a Mandarin teacher. So the net is 0, but it would require those changes.
Except for unemployment.
That would be true if it.
Okay, and that would be because there are no longer any incoming sixth graders in any foreign language, so the 7th grade Mandarin offering would have looked different because that's where everyone would have been starting anyway.
All right.
Okay.
So who is making the presentation? Is it? I heard you and Mary Beth discussing it, so I wasn't sure who was doing it.
I'm going to make the presentation to recognize one of our students. And what I'd like to do is to read to the committee and to the community a little bit about our awardee. And so I'm going to share a little bit about his background. And then what I'm going to ask him to do is to come up and get his certificate, and we would really appreciate it if you'd like to offer a few words afterwards. If you'd like to just recognize your award, and anything you'd like to say, you're more than welcome to do. So it is my pleasure to present the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents Certificate of Academic Excellence Award to Grant Landon. Grant Landon is the valedictorian of the class of 2021, and he is a highly focused student who has a passion for math and science. Grant has spent his time at the regional working towards his dream of attending Brown University. And I am proud to announce that he has been accepted and will be attending Brown University in the fall. Congratulations. An accomplished student athlete, Grant participated as a member of the hockey and lacrosse teams while also balancing history fair, DECA, and math team, and vice president and president of the class of 2021. He has also been the recipient of many academic awards, including the recipient of the Harvard Book Award in grade 11, the recipient of the Patent Leadership Award in grade 11, National Honor Society, grades 11 and 12, Excellence in Science Award, grade 11, Excellence in Math Award, grades 9 and 10, Excellence in Mandarin Award, grades 9 and 10, Excellence in Wellness Award, grade 10, High Honor Roll 9, 10, and 11, and the Hamilton-Wenham Regional Math Team, grades 9, 10, 11, and 12, captain in both of years 11 and 12. Clearly, Grant has taken advantage of all that is offered at the Hamilton-Wenham Regional High School and is an outstanding representative of the senior class. It is my distinct pleasure to award the MASS Certificate of Excellence to Grant Landon.
Okay, she's going to hold it out for you real slow. Turn around and look at your mom. And then Mr. Tracy.
Yeah, you get it. Mr. Tracy, would you like to get a picture here? Grant, would you like to offer a few words? Or sure, right up front there.
Like, this is the warm-up for graduation. You can test out your material.
First of all, I would like to thank the Board of Superintendents for recognizing me for this award. It is a true honor to be recognized, and I am very grateful. I would like to thank everyone at the school, Mr. Tracy, Mr. Menegoni, every teacher that I've had, just for guiding me in this direction, for emphasizing education ever since I was just a little freshman walking through those halls. I would like to thank both my parents who are here, my dad, Sean, and my mom, Amy. Thank you just for raising me and, teaching me to, put my education first, to put, hard work into everything I do, and to ensure that I will further myself and get to, my goals in life. I'd like to thank my sister. She is not here. She is out west, but, I'd like to thank her for being a role model for me ever since I was little. And I'd like to thank all my friends for supporting me through all of this and understanding that, sometimes I have to go home and have a night studying as opposed to, playing board games or something. But, and thank you to anyone who I am forgetting on this speech. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Congratulations.
So the last time we saw Grant, it was to recognize sports. And so we're glad to just say that we have well-rounded students here. And as part of that, we are also going to recognize that we had 2 award winners in the arts. You're welcome to go, though. Thank you.
And for the committee and the community, the exhibit under this shows some of the remarkable work that our students have engaged in and that has become award-winning work. So this evening, I would like to recognize Troy Hargrove for his piece, Captain Horgan Meets Space God. This received a silver key in drawing and illustration for the Boston Globe Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. And if you have a chance to go online and to see his piece, you are sure to be impressed. Along with that, I would also like to recognize Amanda Landon. She received a silver, Landon, I'm sorry, a silver key in photography for her piece Spring Rain, and In the Shadows received an honorable mention in photography. And again, I would invite people to take a look at these exhibits online. They are examples of beautiful artistic work from our students. And again, I would like to formally recognize Amanda and Troy for their Boston Globe Scholastic Art Awards 2020-2021.
Great. Thank you for coming out. We appreciate it. All right. So, Mr. Tracy, you said you may see our friend Grant again in a month or so, so I'm imagining there might be some year-end activities you want to talk about.
This is exciting stuff. I don't have a slideshow, just one page, so we won't have to worry about it advancing.
I know, we don't have to advance.
We're not advancing it, yeah. Excellent. So this is the most current compilation of what we're looking at as the year comes at us at 1,000 miles an hour at the end of the year. I am extremely grateful that kids get to experience these things, these important milestones in their high school careers. I mean, this week, if you come by the high school, there are more smiles and laughing and giggling and, hula hoop contests and all kinds of those activities that connect kids and connect teachers to kids. And I think part of that for us is really trying to figure out ways to keep some of those traditions intact as we move forward, while also balancing it against the guidance that we're trying to work with from the state, and then ultimately getting all of our kids to graduation without anybody missing out. So the top of the list is self-explanatory, really for every student. Our Spirit Week, this whole week, it's been going on since Tuesday. It's one of those things that keeps me up every Sunday night before Spirit Week. This year, Monday night. Here I thought it would have been the vaccine, but it wasn't. It was just me wondering, okay, what kind of weird things will happen this week?
Was it togas?
The kids have been fantastic.
Was it togas today?
Yeah, the togas were.
It was History Day.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I saw.
There's all kinds of fun. Tomorrow's America Day, then the Hawaiian Tropic Day. So the student government really started this in December. They came to me and said, we know this is going to happen. We want to start talking about it. So Steph Rogal and her crew and the student government really worked along with also Sue Howland, worked along developing these ideas with the hope that we could make it happen. Ethan, who's not here tonight, but could, would set the bar. He said to me, we're going to do it the second week in April, just before we go on vacation. I said, how are you so confident in that? He goes, I don't know. We just feel like we can do that. So they put together the plan, and we really appreciate that. It's been so far great, fun to look forward to, fun to experience, and it brings like a little lighter air to a difficult time in schools. AP testing is coming at us extremely quickly. They're usually the first couple of weeks in May. They're extended out a little further than normal this year because there are some online options for some of the tests. All of those are posted on our calendars. National Honor Society induction, right now we're looking at, because of space and numbers, probably doing that virtual, but if the guidance changes and gives me a little more flexibility, I think we'll be able to try to pull something off. The problem we run into is the number of presenters versus the number of kids coming and then families coming. So right now that's scheduled for virtual, but could change. And then MCAS is all over May. It's actually just changed again today for us. It's actually now, those dates are shifting because this was, I think, put on the agenda last week. Today the date shifted to the end of May because now the grade 11 kids no longer have to take the MCAS. So that brought our days down to a more reasonable and realistic. So last couple days in May we'll do ELA. The first couple of days in June we'll end up doing math, and then as you see here, between the first 2 weeks of June we have a window to do the 9th grade science, which is biology. June 10th, which is a Thursday, Underclassmen Award. I haven't put anything on there yet, of whether it's virtual or in person. I would love to do it in person. That's one of those opportunities for kids in 9th, 10th, 11th grade to be recognized academically and by departments. Grant, who was just here, won a number of those awards through the years. And then as we scroll down, Friday, you can come and watch me and Mr. Menegoni and several other staff members cook pancakes and flip pancakes for our seniors Friday morning, 7 a.m. That'll be fun. It's one of those, again, ideas the kids came up. What do you think we can do? Their advisors, Mr. Mara and Mr. Shayla, are really trying to find ways to connect that class in a very short amount of time. We keep forgetting that some of these kids, when they showed up last week on their first day, hadn't seen each other in a year, 6 months, 8 months. So we're trying to really ramp up ways we can do things with them. So pancake breakfast Friday. Feel free to stop by. Red Sox game, we've scheduled for May 11th. The Red Sox have, as you know, a very limited attendance, and they are very strict about people seating and masks and things like that. So we do have, I think, just under 100 kids signed up to go. So we'll spread them out in buses based on what the guidelines say, and go in and have a nice night at the Sox. Hopefully it won't be as cold as the last time we went. It was freezing. And didn't realize the wind could blow that hard in the middle of the night in Fenway, but it does. And then the 22nd, this has been the one thing everybody asks about, the senior parade. So we still need to connect with the town. Started talking with Kent Richards, who really was a great liaison for us to get these things set up and rolling. Senior parade is a very quick, I think it was 40 minutes total, and we had more people in the middle of a pandemic out and cheering on our kids. And I even have people who don't have kids that emailed me and said, that was so great. It was great to get out of my house, even if it was for people I didn't know, but it was for my community. So nice community event. The 26th is a Wednesday. It's really the seniors' last final day, and they'll be doing seniors helping seniors. And what that is we connect small groups of kids, 2 or 3 this year, with senior citizens in both communities, and they go to their house in the morning at 8 o'clock and have something they'll do, like raking leaves, helping them with mulch, moving plants, washing outside windows, different things like that. Simple, basic things, and it's an opportunity for our kids to give back and really an opportunity for us to keep connected to our seniors, which, you know, they really do love to see the kids. I mean, the kids come back and say, oh, they made me cookies and they gave us juice, and I'm not sure how much work always gets done, but it's that, I think the connection's important. There's a lot of conversation, and it's fun for the seniors. We get great letters, you know, handwritten letters that say, this was amazing that these 3 kids came to my house and did this and did that. I look forward to next year. And they start calling right around January to say, are you doing that again this year? So it's a great opportunity for everybody. Scholarship night right now, we're looking at virtual only because of the number. We have over 30 presenters, and then start adding in the kids and their parents. We're looking at numbers. So if some of the guidance changes, we will make adjustments as that goes. And the weird thing about the guidance is, actually I'll wait to tell you that in a second, but senior prom, we're looking at Tupper Manor. We're looking at splitting it. We do have to rent a tent to do that. Tupper Manor has agreed to allow us to send a tent up in front of the function hall. So we would have some of the kids in the function hall, some of the kids outside. We do dancing outside kind of in stages based on maybe bracelets, or, you know, just so we don't have everybody piling together. And basically we follow the rules of an outside venue. So whatever Tupper Manor has to follow for guidance, we follow that guidance. We have a little more leniency. They don't. So we can have, you know, 150 people and that's it. Fortunately, our classes are fairly small, so we're looking at that. And then we'll start graduation rehearsals. Those graduation rehearsals, they come and go really quickly. Senior farewell, it's really just a gathering of the seniors. They get their yearbooks. They have kind of one last hurrah together. They decide where they want to get food from. A lot of times it's Chipotle. And then Chipotle is delivered, they eat, they sign yearbooks, and just have kind of the last few hours together, listen to music. It's a good opportunity. We also give out some departmental awards that night, right at the beginning. So the first 30 minutes or so, we give out the departmental awards to seniors. And then another graduation rehearsal. Candlelight, we are on hold, just due to the size and the impact of candlelight. I may end up doing what we did last year. We do want to have a candlelight speaker, so we will still go through that process, which is a selective process. Based on essays, and then we have people judging the essays, and have that person speak during graduation like we did last year. Graduation Friday, graduation rehearsal on Friday would be the final one, just to kind of make sure everybody's got everything together. And then on the 5th, we graduate out in the field. A little more complex this year, given the guidelines, and the guidelines are unusual. It's very different than a classroom. In a classroom, I can put kids together 3 feet. Any other event outside of a classroom, everybody has to be 6 feet apart. The twist is in the guidance. If you read the guidance, each family can have 6 people. That brings our crowd to almost 1,000 people on the field. There's no possible way to use a tent. The tent would really cover the graduates, and we wouldn't have much left of it at 6 feet. So I'm hoping that guidance changes between now and then to make it a little bit more reasonable to hold, but right now we plan to do the event outside. Just right now we're planning for 6 feet apart, and if that changes, we'll make the adjustment as we've done all along. So that's it in a nutshell, and it should be exciting run for the next 6 weeks. I say goodbye to my family usually around May 1st. Brian and I say goodbye to our families, and then show back up on May, right after graduation, looking for lunch.
Are there questions from anybody on the committee?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for, like you said, just trying to get the most out of this opportunity. Just to give these kids an opportunity to experience their senior year, so thank you personally and from the committee, thank you. Any thoughts, and I'm sure you've already thought of this, we have kids that are getting vaccinated now, and it should open up on the 17th. Is it a, wait and see guidance on that too, or?
Yeah, so we do have a lot of kids getting vaccinated because we're still hanging the question out there of guests at the prom. Is that something that's doable? Well, we can have a football game, and what that to me is a little bit more close contact wise than something we can control. So the vaccinations will help. I think we'll see some changes in the guidance. I just never know with the state, and I know there's a lot of questions. There are a lot of questions coming from principals and probably superintendents back to the Department of Education about these things, like, okay, what about this and what about that? So we're going under current guidance, and as it changes, we're ready to shift, and if we can shift, we'll do that. Like I said, I'm really trying to focus on giving these kids the best opportunities we can in the next 6 weeks. I want the, at least the end to be memorable for them to say, wow, remember high school? We were in a pandemic, but we still did this, this, and this. So it's important.
Do you anticipate limiting guests to less than 6 for graduation?
Given what I've measured, I think I can pull that off. I think I can do it at 6 feet. I just will more than likely, we have a couple of options. We're looking at just kind of creating circles on the field where families will go to pick a circle, bring your own chair, and stay in that circle, and then we'll have the graduates lined up as we usually do so that we can run that kind of formal part of the ceremony. So that's one way, and if the guidance changes, we'll adjust with it. It's one of those things where if we can have mom, dad, grandma, grandfather, or sisters there, then great. I remember the tears last year because we only had a couple people, and that's hard. It's hard to say. So if we have the opportunity, I think we have the football field, and we'll take advantage of as much as we can for the kids.
And can you talk about the thinking behind only administering the MCAS to the 10th graders and then having current juniors wait until their senior year to take it?
So the state last week canceled MCAS for the 11th grade. That's not our decision. They will not have to take it. So they'll be exempt just like last year's seniors. They can, however, choose to take the test so that they could qualify for the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship. Right. So we will send out a letter and say you are still you don't have to take the test. You are still eligible if you would like to qualify, and that's usually the top 25% of that class in each class. And that scholarship is 4 years of tuition at Massachusetts state colleges.
Well, there's also the scholarship that's a money one if you score advanced in 2 out of the 3.
Yeah, so there's the COPLIC is a second scholarship opportunity. They both have money related to tuition. Right. They're just 2 different ways to get it. One's solely based on MCAS. The COPLIC is based on SSAT scores, SAT 2 scores or AP combinations. So they combine other parts of what they would call advanced learning.
Okay.
So those are reasons kids may want to take those assessments.
Yeah, it just seemed weird to put it off when they could just administer it at the same time as they were doing it for the current sophomores, but you're saying it's the state that's making that decision, so.
Yeah, the state basically exempted them, so they won't even have to take it senior year. We just have to give them the opportunity if they choose to for the awards.
Yeah. Thank you. Yay, party.
Yeah, I hope you can come to some of our events. Come for some pancakes if you can. It's just fun. It's a good opportunity for everybody to kind of bring it all back together and get a little bit of normalcy at the same time.
Yeah, let us know when you get the parade details ironed out.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I could just recognize the efforts of the high school administration, and I know the many teachers that are also working alongside with you. This has been a heroic effort on your part, and I know it's being done out of a real care and concern for our students, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Back to the beginning.
Want me to get off of?
So,
I think I can just plug it in.
on the list of
Do you want it airplay? Okay.
things that are unusual this year, the treasurer's fall report is coming to us now. So we're going to have that. We're going to vote the list of approved student activity accounts. And so not many people interact with Don Gallant, but Don Gallant is the school committee's treasurer, and make sure that our bills are paid.
Good evening. I'm going to go through the the FY '20 report first, the one that says July 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2020. Responsibilities haven't changed too much. The big one is we now...
Can you hold on 1 second, Don?
Would I be able to ask everybody to be able to speak into the mic? It's just a little bit harder to hear with the masks on or anything like that.
Super, thank you.
I think just...
As I said, under the responsibilities, the only new one from the last time is this process of all the positive pay transactions. That's a method we use with the bank that they can identify any checks that are phony, or somebody trying to cash a check twice, which happened last week. So I just send them all the information on the checks. They match everything up. Once in a while, their computer makes a mistake on the check number, so 10 o'clock in the morning, I'll get an email saying you have an exception. And almost every time it's been on a day that I have been off. And I have to respond to them by 2 o'clock. So I make a few trips in there just to respond to them. It all started years ago when we got somebody copied one of our checks. On the general account, the one thing I think I want to point out is on what we call the new vendor account. Every month except June, the balance in that bank account is $50,000 plus uncashed checks. But in June, we have the situation that some June bills we don't pay until July because we don't get them till July. So that's what. So we're recording them in June, but we still we haven't paid them. So that's what shows the big negative balance. It was particularly large last June because it includes the payment to the Essex County Retirement, which is over $1 million. And it's not too bad with this set of reports, but the one for the 6-month period afterwards, interest just went away. Next one is each school has a savings and checking account. If they write checks, I transfer money from one to the other. Nothing new. These are our scholarships. They're administered by Eastern Bank Wealth Management. It's been approved by the auditors, and there's only certain things that the school district can be invested in. Basically, very low risk. So we had to, 2 years ago, we had to have them switch a couple of their investments. And we have a couple, as you see, a couple of big scholarships. The Adams Navy won I think we got it just before the last time I spoke. That was a donation of $165,000. Student activities. They started to slow down, of course, a little bit last spring because of COVID. Somebody had asked about the Social Justice Committee, but that isn't a club. That's financed through an ed fund grant. So their dealing is with the ed fund. Some of these haven't been used for a little while, but I think Vinnie and I considered that because of what's gone on for the last over a year, we weren't going to take any off the list until next time, and sometime sooner, so we can see if those clubs, once everybody's back to school, if those clubs start up again. And usually the classes Excuse me, it comes on the next one. Yeah, usually the classes, like the class of 20, usually they don't have that much money, and they have to claim it, set up their own account and claim it shortly after graduation. But this year it was decided to leave that money there because they're planning events. Last year's graduates are planning events to have, and they'll use that money. Receipts, just basically, basically the ones we have every year. And the towns are always up to date on their reimbursement stores. Now, grants. Somebody else asked a question to you about the Ed Fund and how come there wasn't much money from FY18 because they gave a lot. But this only records FY18 money that was given in FY20. The years before, we'll have all the money from FY18 because most of the money was given then. Basically, similar to grants that we get every year. And the bonds. This just records what we paid on principal, what we paid on interest, as you can see, and what's due in FY20, because this was done in June of FY20, so nothing was due, and the payments that are remaining on the 10 and 12 years left on the two bonds. And we'll have in January, we got some more money.
I think you just skipped a page down. You just missed the last page.
Oh, yeah, the last page is, though we haven't seen it for a while, is what the assistant treasurer has been trained to do. I haven't been taking vacations, and I haven't been sick, so we haven't had to call them in. Any questions on any of that? I knew you would have a question.
Can I ask it?
Anna?
I'm going to make a clarifying question.
Sure.
Okay.
Did Anna have a question?
I'm going to ask.
I couldn't hear over there because the fans
I'm going to
were-
ask the question about, I think Anna and I have the same question.
I may have the same question too. Go ahead.
It's regarding the Social Justice Club. So my understanding, and this is just a clarifying, and if it doesn't clarify, then I'm sorry for stepping on Anna's toes, but my understanding from having worked on the Ed Fund,
Ed Fund grant, yeah.
I'm assuming it's similar to the Robotics Club, which I notice is listed in here now.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that typically, I'm wondering if the Social Justice Club is going to be the same way, which is that the Ed Fund did the startup funding. And so for the period of time that the Ed Fund would have agreed, I know, for example, for the robotics, I believe it was 2 years. And now robotics is launched.
Once
and
they
so now
use-
they're on, is that going to be the way the Social Justice
Once they use up the grant from the Ed Fund, if they continue to exist, they have to be a regular club.
That's, I don't know if that was your question, but that is.
Sort of,
That
sort
was just,
of.
I just wanted to make sure it was following that similar path to the way that like a robotics club was launched.
And that's why you haven't had to approve the Social Justice Club, because it's not a club.
Well-
Any new club, when it switches to become a club, you'll have to approve it.
Anna?
So I guess this is a little bit of a clarifying question for both you and for Principal Tracy. I'm under the impression they are very much a club. I mean, they have regular meetings and a district email address and use district resources. I mean, they're most definitely a club within the district. Dana sort of got to my question, which is they did receive a large ed fund grant that we did approve a couple of meetings ago. So my only concern about them not being on the list, it sort of seems to imply that they're not a club that does exist. And unless I'm completely off the mark, Principal Tracy, I think they are a club and they're very active and doing some great work. So is there any downside to not recognizing them formally as such at this time?
It's not that they're not a club, it's that they don't have a student activity account.
I think I can answer this. This is, the robotics is a great example. So robotics got a grant. That grant was from the Ed Fund, which is held separately from student activities accounts. Until that money runs out, so Tate Shippen was also getting donations from outside for the club. Those donations caused us to open a club account and put those donations into the student activities funds. They were separate from the ed funds. So the same thing will happen with the Social Justice Club. Social Justice Club will use up the amounts that are in the ed fund, which are separate, as you all know. And as soon as they say, say they got a $100 donation from somebody, then they would come to us and we would, bring them their name forward to say we want to add them as a club to the student activities accounts and put that money in their account. So until they actually have monies outside of that grant, they're absolutely a club, 100%. It doesn't impact them negatively. It's just when they have money outside of money that's controlled in a different part of the budget, then we actually add them to the student activities list.
Great, thank you.
Does that make sense?
That does clarify.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess I actually do have a question. So on the class account, and on the inactive accounts, we have policies regarding those. So if we're not going to follow the policies, I do believe that the school committee should approve that and not that be a decision of someone in the white building. So if that's been done, I would ask that you bring that to the next committee meeting to approve. It looks like we're suspending the policy for a year, which is a reasonable thing, but we just should approve that since it's a policy.
Which were the two clubs you mentioned?
Well, if you said that the class of 2000 was not required, or 2020 was not required to follow the policy and have their money withdrawn, and that the inactive accounts were not closed and dispersed amongst the other accounts according to the policy, then if the policy's been suspended, the committee should be deciding that, not the people in the white building. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, because the prior year, we closed a few clubs.
Yes.
And did disperse the money to the other clubs.
Right.
I think in discussion with, I think Eric just explained the Social Justice Club, and I would imagine that pretty soon it will become a real club. But it's, isn't student activity money. It's ed fund money. So it's different than a regular club.
Right. But what I'm saying is, if the class of 2020 has been allowed to leave their money with the district, that's in violation of our policy.
Mm-hmm.
The committee should be making the decision to hold the policy, not other people. So we should have that come before us.
We should correct the inactive club policy. Our graduating clubs, our policy actually gives us 2 years to disperse the funds.
Okay.
So I think we're good there. It's more on the inactive clubs past 3 years. We should
Which is
definitely
fine.
have you bring,
I mean, it's fine. We should do that, but
we should bring it forward to you.
And I inquired of the high school, Lisa, who handles it, and there's been so little activity this year. Second half of last year and this year, that it was felt that it was, so some of the clubs hadn't been active for 2 years, but we figured we'd leave them there for a short more time because they hadn't had a chance to do anything in the last year.
I don't disagree with the decision. I disagree with
thing.
who has the authority to make that decision. So, Anna?
Under normal times, how long does a club have to be inactive before its funds are dispersed?
3 years.
3 years.
3 years.
Okay.
It's in the finance policy.
And then they disperse through the remaining active clubs.
Yeah.
This year, this report, looking at it, the inactive clubs total more money than the inactive clubs have in the past. You know, last time we did it, it was less than $1,000 in the clubs that we deactivated, but it's going to be a little more than that this year. Now, the other report is from the period July 1st, 2020 to December 31st, so it's the first half of FY21. And it's excuse me, it's the same reports, but you'll notice that for 6 months, the interest is only $1,500 on the major account. Prior years would have been $9,000-$10,000. But the interest rate, of course, is at one of its lowest points ever. Same thing on the student activities, as I said. When they write a check, they just send me a document asking me to transfer money from the savings to the checking account. And I do reconcile these accounts every year, every month. And scholarships, in this period, in July, we wrote checks for the last year's graduating class, so we wrote almost $26,000 worth of checks, and that's why the balance went down. Student activities again. As you see, a lot of clubs had some had some money to activity, but many didn't. And of course, the club that has its most money taken in and spent is DECA. That's where they have 150 kids. 150. And they go to conferences and stuff. So there's money coming in. The next one is the motion. Do you want to do that right now?
It's probably at the end.
Okay. Receipts, basically the same receipts we get every year. And grants. You see in the grants that we got just over $400,000 on a school reopening grant, which we've never had before. This is part of COVID. And we have a few individual organizations that give us money as a grant. The bonds were just 6 months later. And as you see, we got 9 years remaining one and 11 years on the other. Personally, I like to see that $24 million bond is no longer on there. It's been paid off for the middle school, high school. All in all, I certainly hope that the next 6 months or to the rest of the year shows some of that activity in the clubs starting up again. Because there's a lot of clubs and a lot of kids interested in all the clubs.
So we were a little late this year with getting you the active club list, but hopefully the first meeting in July of this year, we have the new list for the next fiscal year, also accompanied with any accounts that we'd like closed at the time. So But right now, this is just a motion to keep the active clubs that we have present going forward for this year.
Do you want a motion,
Questions on
Michelle?
this? I have a couple questions. What is the limit on the high school student activities funds?
For the checking account, it's $25,000.
25,000.
And there's no limit on the savings.
There's no limit on savings, okay. And so I think Vinnie and I discussed this earlier, but I just want to double check that my understanding is correct. Look at me trying to. So ESRA, school reopening, and remote learning, those 3 grants total a little over $500,000 that we've received sort of like related to.
To COVID, those are all pretty,
offset.
yes, those are all COVID grants for the most part.
All right. So the public schools have received about $500,000, while some of the private schools in town have received over $1 million. So I just would like to make that point.
Yep, there is another grant out there for, I believe, approximately $300,000 that we have not received yet.
Okay.
We have it available till, I believe, September of 2024 to draw the funds down. So we didn't need them this year, so we deferred them off till next year. So that's why they're not on the chart right
And
now.
then my other question is, I'm curious as to why Hamilton Wenham Gives Back has had no spending, since I've seen them stating that they've made donations.
I would maybe defer my friend if he happens to have.
So I couldn't hear what you said.
And of course,
On the report, it says that Hamilton Wenham Gives Back has had no spending, but yet I've seen them state that they have made donations this year.
Yeah, I have 2 now. They said there was mostly been donations in kind. Like right now, they're donating colored pencils, markers. So a lot of what they've done is in kind and not financial.
Okay.
So they're making clothing donations, or they're making like we did the clothing drive for our coats, the Anton's coat drive. So it's mostly stuff that's in kind and not something we'd write a check for.
Okay.
Not direct
Thank you.
funds.
Correct.
Yeah. They have received funds this year, but they have not dispersed.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
yeah, there's been, as I said, very little activity.
Anna?
Because they haven't been there. And they can't organize, they
Yep.
can't get together and organize clubs, and they've been, split in 2. So hopefully, now that they're all there together, they'll start up some activities.
Anna?
This is sort of a question related to the grants and Vinnie. So at some point soonish, are we going to get a sort of our Q3 update? I'm assuming that's sort of somewhat pending. The grants and the various restrictions, the money coming in, at what point, and this is maybe a little bit of a question for Mary Beth as well, when are we going to start to develop a plan for what we're actually going to use that money for, especially if it's got a 3-year horizon? Is that something that is going to be part of an upcoming budget presentation?
Yeah, I can share that we're still waiting the formal allocations for that money. But to your point, once we have the total dollar figure in terms of what we're working with, then we will come to you with a recommendation of how to move forward with that. One of the things that is helpful about this is the amount of time that we have to spend it. And so, that will be a conversation that we will come to with in terms of strategy. Does it make sense to spend a large amount up front? Do we want to look at something over a period of years? But what we do not yet have is the formal allocation. We anticipate that's coming at any moment.
So I guess related to that, given how long that horizon to spend is, it would make sense that the restrictions of what we can do with the money will not be as narrow as sanitizer and testing and medically related things, because hopefully in 2024, we're not going to be doubling down on sanitizer, right, Tom? I mean, we shouldn't need that much sanitizer anymore.
No, you're absolutely, that the acceptable expenses under this latest money are significantly broader than what we've had before. So, before things like tents and chairs and sanitizers, those were the things that could clearly get put on this grant. What we do know about the new grant that's coming out is that there is, we can use staffing, and there's a number of different things that we are going to be be able to allocate the money to. And to your point, I think it's a really strategic discussion about where those funds go.
Does it still have to be somehow or another tied to the pandemic? Something about the pandemic will have triggered us to have an issue?
A number of different criteria, and so depending on how we might position certain expenses, there would probably be a way to tie it back to how that money is spent. Again, what I'll share with you right now is that it's a much broader range, and that the way that these grants are written, they give you criteria for how to spend it, but the way in which we look at that criteria would enable us to look at a number of different initiatives that could be funded by this grant money.
Okay.
So when we come to you, we will have done that research to say, yes, this would fit under the restrictions of the grant.
Okay, thank you.
And
Dana,
as Tom knows, we spent a lot more money on COVID than we've received.
Right.
Do you need a motion?
Dana, can you make a motion? And I think you can just
I have it.
say as exhibit, yeah.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee vote to approve the following high school subsidiary accounts for the 2020-2021 school year as listed
Is there a
on the
second?
exhibit.
There you go. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Anna. Any discussion about these? Great. All those in favor? That was unanimous, so there's none opposed. All right.
Thank you, Dawn.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn.
So now we are on to, we received a letter
Principal Tracy.
from the town of, well, actually, we received 2 letters this week. The first one is from the town of Hamilton, from the Board of Selectmen. You may recall in the fall, was it in the fall? They had that ballot vote? Was that in the fall?
There was a, it was,
In the fall, there was a fall vote to do some bonding, to do some work at their town hall, and it failed. And at that time, there was some discussion that people maybe were voting no because there was only a certain pot of money, and if they voted for the town hall, they couldn't have a turf field.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the...
That if they voted for the town hall, they couldn't have a turf field. And so the Board of Selectmen has asked us to sort of do something that's unusual for our school and our town, which is to support the town hall renovation project based on the fact that it isn't really a single pot of money. There's a pot of money that money goes in and money comes out, and money goes in and money comes out, and that right now we are not in a position to be taking the money out. So that is what is before us. If we want to do that, if you want to write a letter, or if you want to authorize me to speak at town meeting to this, or if you want to have something at the town meeting, or if we want to pass on this opportunity. So I'll open that up for questions, comments. Dana?
So I have a couple of questions. So I'm not 100% sure, Julia's looking at me like, I'm not sure exactly what it means. In other words, I understand when you say they're asking us to consider endorsing, I understand that we could each individually choose to if we wanted to.
Correct.
And they're asking us as school committee members that we might be people that people might look at in the community, and if we I understand that we can do that as individuals.
Right.
But is there a question here, and maybe that's what you just said about authorizing someone to speak, or is there a vote? I'm not 100% sure how that would work. We haven't done that as far as I know before.
We have never, that I can recall, done, like, I don't even recall supporting the library, to be honest with you. I don't remember. That was a long time.
I guess
my kid was really little then. I might not have been paying attention.
Well, I guess my question, that wasn't really, I guess my question is, it feels like what you just said is more of like a statement of clarification, like to be clear that we are not, that this is not pitting one thing against the other, that if you want this, you can't have that, that's a point of clarification, but that's a little bit different than an endorsement.
Right.
So I'm just curious about what that would look like.
Endorsing is what they're asking for, so that's
Yeah,
what
so
I'm
I just don't know what that would look like. Would that look like a vote of this committee? Would it look like the committee writing a statement as a joint statement? What would it look like?
Yeah. Anna, go ahead while I'm thinking about this. What do you think?
I sort of have a similar question, but also I think when I read the letter, I interpreted it a little bit more simply, that they're just asking for a vote of affirmation or not.
Yeah, that could be.
Sort of similar to the way that they vote, on the warrant articles, the Board of Selectmen recommends favorable action or not. I sort of interpreted this as theoretically, there might be a statement that says the school committee recommends or does not recommend action by a vote of whatever. To me, that's what it felt like.
Yep.
I think the feeling that one pot of money is in opposition to another is a little bit more of a gray area, because I think it's subject to people's personal feelings about what they individually can afford. I think mechanically, it's helpful for the public to understand that it's not like there's one pot and that anything to do with town hall is going to take away from the schools. That's just the funding structure does not mean that. However, as a taxpayer, an individual taxpayer could develop a philosophy that says, well, I have a limited amount of income for my taxes, and therefore I'm choosing to wait or prioritize this project or that project or not. So that to me feels a little bit more like an individual voter decision about what they think their financial bandwidth is. So I think it is good to sort of explain to the public structurally, nothing to do with the town hall project will hurt the schools. I think that's a statement of fact. Whether or not individual voters choose to support anything, whether it's town hall and schools and turf fields and trash collection, I have to get that in for the Hamilton voters, that's really up to them. So I feel like they're just asking for us to offer a vote of action or inaction, not necessarily speak or a letter or make it more complicated, because I personally am happy to take a vote about how we feel about the project. I don't feel like it's our place to tell voters how they should or should not prioritize their tax dollars.
Yep. And I think either a vote or statement, whatever, to say that we are collaborating, that the past is the past, we are on a new chapter right now, and that we understand that, like you're saying, the projects can happen with proper planning together. So just a reinforcement.
I want to be careful that maybe it's not seen as a full-on endorsement, like Anna said, like we're not trying to sway the vote either way. And then I also just worry about precedent, and I don't know if more people are going to come to us.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know if I feel necessarily qualified. I mean, I live in Wenham, so I don't know.
Right.
Those are all just my thoughts, but
Right.
I think the
That's
statement
an
of collaboration is a good idea.
Peter, do you have anything you want to add?
No, just to say I agree with Julia.
So it's asking for endorsement, but Anna, I like the way you phrased it.
I do too.
Which was like recommending favorable action, or recommending almost this, like recommending that the school committee is not being...
We're collaborating together. There's a planning process.
There's a planning process, like it's...
And we are talking with everyone to make everything less impactful and more beneficial for all.
Yeah.
How would we pull that
I don't know
together?
if you could, yeah.
Well, what I would say to Julia's point about precedent is I think if we frame it in the same way that they recommend favorable action on things that come up related to the schools, I kind of feel like this is just an even exchange. Like I think I'm not overly worried about precedent, because I think the Board of Selectmen and the FinComs kind of opine about our affairs quite a bit, so this sort of feels somewhat similar. But I do think that and I've had this conversation private with lots of people, but I want to agree with what Michelle Horgan is saying, is that there's no town of the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School District. That place does not exist. And so I do think the message that says, the district is part of these communities. The town halls support the communities. They support, we work with people at town hall. They work with us. Like, we're really all in it together. So I also feel like there is an opportunity to sort of affirm that, to just say, we can't, the town doesn't operate without the school district. The school district doesn't operate without the towns. We're not separate entities. So I think that to me feels like what the ask is, and I think it's fairly straightforward, and I don't think it's establishing a huge precedent. I also think Julia is wise to bring that up. Theoretically, this is an unusual ask. We're not renovating the town halls every other year, God help us, right? So there's also the opportunity, if we ever were presented with another request and we felt like it was inappropriate or out of keeping, we can always say, no, thank you, or we can do what they do, which is we decline to take a position. Sometimes they do that too. So I'm not worried about precedent because I think we have outs. But I personally have supported this project, and I am in favor of both endorsing it and also as a position as a committee, but I don't think we have to do more than that, but that's just my opinion.
So I would like, I agree with Anna, and I would love it if Anna would make that, I'm suggesting that if Anna wants to make that motion, that we could vote to, what did you say? Recommend and support, maybe. But I also, my 2 cents on the opinion part is, as I stated earlier, I think everyone here is really thinking about what's best for the students, and I would encourage everyone to think about this. I know I think about the students and what serves the students, and whether or not having a, functional town hall serves students in our community, and that's not telling anyone how to vote. That's telling how I'm thinking about it, and that I think that's important in this setting. That's the hat that you would have on when you're making that recommendation, is when you're thinking about the students in our community, what value does this have for them? That's my 2 cents.
So, Anna's going to make the motion? Is that right?
The pressure at the motion. I'll do my best. If I don't get it right, please be gentle with me. I move that the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School Committee recommend favorable action to the Hamilton Town Hall renovation project.
Yeah, that's good. I'll second.
Second by Julia.
Okay, so that's going to be the action that we're going to make, but the words that we can use are the words that Michelle has said, or no?
What words did I say that were different?
That we're collaboratively planning our long-term capital.
Long-term capital projects. And
does that need to be included in the motion? Does anybody feel uncomfortable with that not being in the motion?
I think it belies the motivation of the motion, or the spirit of it. I mean, we can add to it.
Just want to be sure that everybody understands the mantra. Perfect. All right, then let's vote. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. So there's none opposed, so we won't do that. Great. So we will, I will send them an email stating that we stated that, and that we are continuing to work collaboratively in our capital planning after I watch and see what was actually said. All right. Late breaking news. Some 8th graders are needed or are desired to be on our track and field team for the spring. And go ahead.
If you want, I just speak to this quickly, but we felt like this was important to get on tonight's meeting, given the fact that seasons are short. So we have received a request from the Hamel-Wenham Athletics for the school committee to grant an 8th grade waiver for the sport of track and field. Again, much like we saw in softball, track and field numbers are down due to the late start in the season. At this point, middle school is not able to offer their normal track program that they generally run in the spring, so this will give opportunities to 8th graders. The Cape Ann League and the principals of Hamilton-Wenham Regional High School and the middle school are in support of this. And when an interest survey was sent out, there were 14 student athletes in the middle school who would be interested in pursuing this option. So you have a request in front of you to approve an 8th grade waiver for the sport of track and field.
So why don't we have a motion to approve, and then we'll see if it passes.
Sure. I move that the Hamilton-Wenham Regional High School approve a waiver for 8th grade students participating in track and field for the spring 2021 season.
Or a second?
I'll second.
Does anybody have questions? Peter?
Where will they practice? Because our track is unusable, right?
No, it's usable. They're still practicing on the track.
I thought our track was deemed like other.
They won't have meets there.
They won't have meets
But
there.
they can still practice on it.
They can practice, but other coaches have deemed it unsafe. Is that what it is?
I think because part of the lane is destroyed, they can't have meets there.
So we won't have meets there, but we allow
Yeah,
them to
but we usually
practice.
have them in Ipswich because it's convenient and big.
So is our football field still unusable as well?
No, they have football games there.
I thought last year it was deemed unsafe.
They took a rest because they didn't use it in the springtime because the spring sports were canceled.
Yep.
So they had 2 home games this year.
And our tennis courts are still unusable, right? All right.
Tennis courts is still up in the air, but okay. Did you have a question, Anna?
I do. This was actually a question posed to me by a constituent in a generalized way. And I was surprised when we have a middle school track program, do we not have other middle school sports, or do we have middle school sports in general? Like, what's the normal middle school?
Sometimes we have basketball, sometimes we have, what?
Field hockey, wasn't field hockey?
Yeah.
And those are teams that play against other Cape Ann League schools, or is it all intramural?
Middle school, in a middle school.
Within the middle school itself?
Yeah, Cape Ann Lake, yep.
Yep.
No, do they play other schools? I think they do.
The other schools, yes.
They do. So, and I'm sorry, what was?
Oh, and do we have hockey at the middle school level or no? Okay.
So field hockey, track and field, sometimes basketball. Sometimes. So it's sort of student dependent?
Was golf.
Cross country, they had.
Oh, yeah, there was golf. I forgot about that, yeah.
There's a coach at the middle school and the level of interest from the students.
Okay. That's helpful, because someone asked me if we had middle school sports, and I honestly thought that we didn't have them, so I'm relieved to hear we have some. That's great.
Some, yeah. Dana?
I'm sorry, I missed. I just have I do want to stay focused. I'm in support of this, but some feedback that I'm going to give Mary Beth for you from just speaking for myself. In the future, if Craig Genualdo wants to make a bigger statement about 8th graders participating, for me, I would really need a much more in-depth look at what the implications of that would be. I understand that this is a very unique situation, but it's just my feedback that I would really want to hear much more about that, because as a bigger picture, if the idea is for this to become a policy, then I'm going to need more information in order to support it.
I'm right there with you. I always vote against these.
Yeah. But I understand this is a unique situation and a unique year, and I understand it.
Right, but outside of our COVID world, this would need a much deeper discussion. Is I think what I hear.
Thank you. That's what I meant. That's what I wanted to say.
All right. So it looks like we're ready to vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. All right. There's no need to vote. Opposed? It's unanimous. Okay. We have some policies that are ready. They are, well, we have one that's well baked and ready, and we have some that we are going to read for the first time. Anna, are you taking that?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Michelle. So we have 4 policies to look at tonight. As Michelle said, one of them we've looked at a few times, but so we'll start with that one. The other ones, this is your first look at them, and I can offer some context about where they are and where they've come from. So the one that we've seen a few times is unlawful possessions of weapons or other dangerous instruments on school property. That's MASC file JICI. This was just about ready to go, but Mary Beth sought advice from counsel, who said we needed to make an exception for law enforcement, which was wise. So we brought it back to policy, and then I think 2 or 3 meetings ago, we hashed it out a bit. So what we did then is we added the line that you see in red, which grants an exception for law enforcement. So that was the only change from the last time we sort of had gotten to it. And again, just as a quick reminder, we came about this policy, I think Dorothy presented 5 or 6 different options that we sort of looked at, and we kind of collectively liked this one the best. And then we brought it minus the red ink, and then Mary Beth suggested we add the exception. So that's where this came from.
I feel like at the last time we had feedback around the mace and the pepper spray. What was resolved on that?
I think that was, I'm sorry, I don't mean to speak. I think that's why we use the words may be referred as opposed to shall be referred, that there would be some latitude given to the building principal about the nature of what it was and how it was. And
okay.
That's my memory. Maybe I'm misremembering. That's what I thought.
That's how I remember it also.
Yeah, I couldn't remember. I just remember we had that conversation. Okay. Are there other questions?
Are we going to, do you want me to move on each one of these individually?
Well, this is the only one we're having a motion on,
Okay. So then we're ready?
Yep.
Okay, I move that the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School Committee approve the unlawful possessions of weapons or other dangerous instruments on school property policy as presented in the exhibit.
And when will this go into effect?
Huh?
When does this go into effect? Is it immediately? Is it in a month from now? Is it in form? What are we doing?
Oh, yeah,
So,
sorry.
so, I mean, we could, I think the committee has the discretion to make it immediate, like we did with a few others. I think I'd mentioned this at the last meeting, that Dorothy's advice to us is that we sort of move forward on the whole batch of policy. So we're going to go through that at the next subcommittee meeting, which ones have already been approved in form. So we could, in my opinion, we could approve this in form now. We could approve it, make it effective immediately. If we approve it in form, I would anticipate that the entire batch of things that have been in form, have been holding for the last couple of years, will be made effective within the next couple months.
I think I looked at our notes. I think we said possibly June, too.
Yep.
So it would be quick.
So I think I'm mid-motion. Should I say in form? Is that the one we want?
Yeah, I think we want it in form.
I think so.
Okay. In form.
Well, that was nice. That was all in one breath. That was all in one motion.
I second.
Okay, so the motion before us is to approve this in form, which means that it will become a policy at a time in the future when we approve a big batch of them. Any questions on that? All right, then why don't we vote? All in favor? All right, there's nobody opposed because it's unanimous. All right, now these are first readings, so they're here to be given feedback.
So this one, really, I want to give Dana a lot of credit for, because she did a deep dive with Dorothy around our executive session practice and policy, and really looks at everything back and forth. So kudos to Dana for really helping to drive this project. This was originally going to be presented at the last meeting in March, that we never discussed it. But then Dana, once again, with eagle eyes, noticed that there had been a discrepancy for purposes 2 and 3. For some reason, our proposed policy and the MASC's proposed policy deviated from the 10 meeting meetings for reasons for executive session according to the Attorney General. So while we had a break, we pulled it back to policy and went ahead and made that correction to conform directly to the language of the 10 reasons. So that's why points 2 and 3 are in red. The only other things that came out of that conversation, we made gender neutral the use of the there up at the top. It used to say he or she, and we've made it there to be inclusive. And then really the very, very last paragraph, this is where Dana's hard work really paid off. It was suggested that we add the qualifying words in the event minutes are requested, because that was sort of missing from the prior policy. So I might defer to Dana as to what led down that path, but we talked about it and decided that that language was helpful to making this policy clearer.
Are there any questions?
Thank you for your hard work on this.
I just asked a lot of questions. It was a little table turning on Anna.
Okay, so, put that on for a second reading on the 5th, because the 5th is still a little bit open. Okay.
Okay, the next one is IJOA, field trips. This really is the work of Dorothy Presser. The MASC batch of policies and our own policies, I think, were 8 or 9 pages long. And they were detailed at a level that was a little uncomfortable, and they were repetitive. You know, what bus service must one use? What sort of driver? It was in Section A, it was in Section 4. It was dense and repetitive. So Dorothy took the whole thing apart, and this is actually a Hamilton-Wenham custom policy. She took it all and blended it for us. So she put a lot of work into it, and we talked about it for a long time at the subcommittee level. One of the pieces of feedback from Mary Beth was that we wanted to give enough structure so that parents felt assured the committee had thought of things, but not to dictate minutia and detail. So there's a lot of places where it's, you know, at the discretion of the administration, at the review of the principal. So someone in a position of authority needs to vet all of the details, which is a bit of a deviation. It used to be that the school committee was going to approve a lot of those details, and that was just too much. So that's the high level. That's the biggest change from the draft policies to what you have here. Mary Beth, did I get that right?
You got it.
A lot of questions. On the second page, the first thing, it says final approval should be sought no less than 30 days prior to the scheduled dates, except those required for student participation in tournaments and contests. This before was a point of contention with the committee, and this was taken to read that approval was not required. So, is that what this means? That if you qualify to go to New York for the whatever drama thing and it's 3 weeks away, you do not need approval? Or is it that you still need the approvals of the principal, the superintendent? Or does it mean if there is a school committee meeting in the meantime that it has to be approved by the school committee? Like, what does it mean? So,
my interpretation was that it meant it still had to be approved, but it could be within the 30 days, because it might be an unexpected happy surprise you get to compete in this. So still subject to approval, but not within 30 days, because you might not know until 2 weeks before that you're going to go.
Yeah. That's how I interpreted it the same way.
So just, it's been interpreted other ways in the past, so we need to be clear on how it still requires approval. But what if there isn't a school committee meeting to get that approval? Is the superintendent authorized to do that or not?
So what you're suggesting is, and it sounds like, given history here, that clarity around who would grant the approval if the school committee is not able to do so.
Correct.
That would be a helpful add to this policy?
Yep.
That makes a lot of sense.
And also who is able to cancel. Is the superintendent able to cancel, or does the superintendent need to get the school committee together to cancel?
Well, I'm sorry, Michelle, I don't mean to respond directly.
Yep.
I think one of the things we changed is that the authority to approve, I guess it really would only qualify to the out-of-state and overnight trip.
Correct.
So, because anything that's...
And late night.
Right, so the only thing that requires out-of-state or overnight trips, if you read the bottom of page 1,
Correct.
Are those things. So
Correct.
theoretically, you could have a last-minute competition that's not overnight or out-of-state that the
Correct.
principal could approve. So would you like to see more clarity of language around that exemption piece there?
Yeah. New England is small, and kids go out of state for things, so this has come up before.
Okay.
It could be, when we go back to policy, just taking what's in the out-of-state language and putting it into that one, perhaps. So we'll remember that for our next meeting.
And then the other part is the use of private vans and automobiles for trips planned to include late night or overnight. Student travel is not permitted. Does that mean that parents cannot drive their own children to things? So.
Well, then I'm just writing a note about the first thing you were talking about.
And it should go without saying, but in a previous incident, students were driving themselves and other students, and that, I think, should be called out as not acceptable. So. Regardless of the age of the student.
So for that, if it were to say, such trips will use commercial vans or motor coaches and employ professional licensed drivers, or be driven by the student's parents?
But what if they don't, what if their parents are not able to drive them? I'm just thinking, like, what if it's some kind of tournament and they just need to drive themselves? I have no idea.
Their parents' permission.
So,
If they have their parents' permission.
my experience with 8 million high school sporting events is that it is not, they're never allowed to drive themselves.
Never.
What if their parents get to drive them?
Well, typically for a competition, they're going to be going on the bus. We're going to be, and they're not allowed to say, no, I'm going to drive myself, or no, my parents are going to drive me. No, the idea is that they need to travel with the team, however the team or the drama group or however they're getting there, the group is going to go, right? That's the intent
And I
here,
think that was my reading of it, is saying, no, you can't drive yourself. You have to go on the school-provided
bus.
transportation.
Yeah, well, I'm just telling you, there are groups that don't do that. So if that is what you're going to do, we need to make sure that those groups know that that is not allowed.
Well, that's what it says, the use of private vans and automobile.
Yep, says that right now, and that's not what happened. So,
Okay, but that's,
That's not our,
right, that's, then we need to,
saying,
right.
we can't do anything about that.
I'm just saying, if the committee is affirming this, then it will be known that that is the way it's going to be.
And what you're saying is that that might be a cultural shift from past practice.
Correct.
Right, and I actually, Michelle, if I'm sorry to jump in.
Yep.
Is that okay? It sounds like you're wondering if right now it says the use of private vans and automobiles, that to me, that is clear that we're saying parents can't drive, students can't drive, but that perhaps there needs to be maybe more specific wording there. Is that what you're saying? That it says students, we could put it back to policy to say, this needs to be more clear to say students must travel with the group or whatever.
Yeah, or whatever it says for sports, because as you know, you can sign your kid out at the end.
Right.
You don't have to travel home.
Yes, although I think on some sports teams, that is a bone of contention as well.
Yeah.
Whether you're,
Mirror maybe whatever it says for sports, but I don't know what it says for sports.
Yeah.
So
Other than that, you can sign your kid out to go home.
if we were to add the language that said something like the use of private vans and automobiles, including parent vehicles,
Yeah.
Would that be helpful clarity, just to make sure that people understand we're meaning parents too?
Yeah, but the question is, so I'll give you a different example that isn't the example I was talking about, but let's say for DECA, you go down to the state competition, everybody goes down on the bus, fine, or rides the train. One year they rode the train. Parents will pick up from there. So it's sort of like the transportation to the event may be different than the transportation away from the event.
Okay.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
But I think this doesn't just cover sporting events, you know what I mean? So,
right.
So I think.
But that's why I was like giving an example
So
of
does
DECA.
that happens also at other tournaments? I'm thinking, what if it's something where only one kid is going?
History
It's
fair.
like a debate, or it's a good Model UN or something.
History fair, and you're the only one that made it to the.
The net.
Right. Yep.
Right.
You know, one of the things that you could consider is kind of that language at the discretion of administration, because
Right.
there
Yes.
are circumstances that could occur where it would make perfectly logical sense for a parent to drive their student or something like that. But that would give the administrator in charge the ability to utilize that discretion.
Yeah.
And
But it should definitely say no students drive themselves or other students.
now, but Michelle Horgan, remind me, I think though that in policy, didn't we discuss that there are some students who do drive themselves and other students to practice?
Yes.
And there's no other way to do it?
That's practice. That's not a field trip.
Okay, so we're still, so the fact that this is being qualified to the late night and overnight trips is a really crucial detail here.
Or out of state.
And I think what Mary Beth said, you know, at the discretion of the administrator. Administration is probably key, so we'll.
Okay. Anything else on this one?
Well, and it should include, it should follow the same rules that sports follow. Sports, if you are driving yourself, Anna, and you are my student, my child, I would have to give written approval for that. Like, it needs to be the same sort of.
Isn't this policy going to be the policy for sports? Is there a separate sports policy?
This is not the policy for sports. This is field trips.
This is just field trips. Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe what we want to do in the policy meeting is pull the sports.
I was just going to
piece
say,
and this
look at the
piece and look at how they're
Close
mirroring.
together, yeah.
Right. And that helps too with oh, I'm sorry.
Also clarification. Okay, thank you.
And then the last one is right out of the MASC. I don't believe that we changed any piece of it. I do recall, it was a while ago we talked about this one. I do recall there was some conversation around topic and appropriateness and bias and speakers, and that it was sort of decided that, you know, the teachers of our district and the administrators can be trusted to not invite someone who's going to be an inflammatory, riot-inducing speaker. So we sort of felt like we were comfortable with that. But I do remember we had some conversation, right, Peter and Michelle? I think we talked about it, but ultimately didn't put any sort of edicts into word, with the understanding that we can trust our staff and administration to make good choices about guest speakers.
Even though occasionally they don't. As Michelle Horgan and I both are aware. Look forward, that's right. It's still an epic story to be told. So, okay. Any feedback? Okay, perfect.
So just to be clear, Michelle, so weapons we're done with. Hooray! Executive session sounds like there aren't changes, so we might be in a position to approve that, as well as community speakers at the next meeting.
Yep.
But it sounds like field trips needs to come back to policy for a little bit more work.
Little something.
Is that right?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
So, in traditional, well, I guess this isn't really traditional 18th century because it came through email. We received a letter that we were CC'd on. The lone Board of Selectmen Gary Cheeseman has written to our state senator and state representative, specifically asking for better funding related to Chapter 70 and school transportation. So I just wanted to recognize and thank him for that, and then discuss whether or not we would like to do something similar, which we can discuss on the 5th, but if people want to give some thought to that. And is there anything? This is only one-sided. Maybe it was two-sided. Okay, here, it's only one-sided. So that's it. Committee reports seem to also have been on here before. So, capital, finance, do you have anything to report? Have you met?
Tom sent out the letter to the steering committee members today. Thank you for doing that, Tom. So hopefully your inbox will be stuffed tomorrow morning when you open it up, as everyone wants to join our steering committee. So we're moving forward with that, so thank you.
Yeah, if those are available next week, or on the 5th, that would be great. Are you looking to get the committee approved and started
On the
right
5th?
away?
I think we did at the last meeting.
Yeah.
Well, the people install
The
the people,
people.
the actual people.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The names. So if you can't, then,
Confirmations is what, okay.
yeah,
Yeah, not a problem.
okay.
We know where they
Policy,
live.
do you have anything more, or?
No, I think our next meeting, I know, is scheduled. We'll fix this, and then, like I said, we're going to try to do a batch process to catch up a little, so they're not lingering.
Negotiations has an update that they'll be giving in executive session. There's more.
Yeah, I mean, I think here in open session, we're just, I'm going to give a more detailed, but in open session, we're just continuing to negotiate with the HWA. And I will give you a more detailed update in a few minutes.
Okay. We're at the consent agenda, which includes some warrants, which are bills, and minutes from a workshop on the 17th. Which I think was the one we had at the high school. Yeah. Does anybody want to hold any of those? Great. So let's have a motion to approve them.
I move that we, the Hamilton Regional School Committee, approve the consent agenda as presented, and no changes shall be made.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Great, Anna seconded. All in favor? Okay, there's unanimous, there's none opposed, so we won't take a vote on that. We have topics for future meetings. Anna?
Sort of just a question, and I'm actually glad that Pam Milbenstein brought it up, because I had a similar suggestion for, I think that, so when we have our next step in sort of our DEI conversation, I do think that we would benefit from a professional facilitator. And I know that, Michelle Horgan, you said you reached out to the MASC. I'm not sure if they're the right place, but since they did put on a DEI workshop, I feel like they have to have some resources. I also feel like, I know locally there are some districts that have officers and staff members. I mean, there are a lot of trainers out here, and I do feel like if, just as I've reflected on that conversation and our next steps, I think that our group would really benefit from someone with, one, a neutral perspective, because I talk a lot about this issue and I have a lot of feelings about it, and I have a heavy hand, and I think that the group would benefit from a more neutral I think we'd all benefit, myself included. So I know that there's dates sort of in the future. There were some next steps, but I kind of feel like the next time this is on the agenda, I would like us to actually have a professional facilitator with expertise in this area. And I feel like of all the things that we spend money on, I mean, I think we need some help if we're going to actually move this forward credibly in a way that feels good. I think otherwise we'll just have another kind of awkward conversation unto ourselves, and I think there are resources there. So I'm happy to try to pursue and suggest a couple other facilitators, or maybe have another go at the MASC, some of the people that we seem to like, that we heard when they presented the last time. So I would just want to get that onto the table for discussion and find out when when are we going to sort of pick up that ball again? Because we talked about the 5th, we talked about the 19th, but then I think we've kind of stalled now, so.
Okay, can you refresh my memory? We're supposed to be writing the definitions. Isn't that for the 28th? Is that what you're talking about?
I'm not actually sure.
Someone for then?
I'm not sure either.
I'm not, to be honest, I'm not sure what really the defined next step was for this activity, but I do know that our last meeting, we were kind of all over the place, and I think as a priority, I think with a little bit of time and maybe even potentially, I mean, maybe the MASC has someone for free, maybe not, but I mean, in the last few weeks, we've approved budget allocations for all kinds of professional consultants. I think that this is a place where we need to apply the same prioritization to figure out what the next steps of this conversation need to be.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I was also confused about our next step. I wrote down that we were to go back and look at maybe Dana's definition. Sorry, I'm really tired. Dana's definition and Anna's, and maybe piece together something that we thought would be appropriate. But then I feel like we got off track because, like Peter and I were saying, there's already definitions of equity out there. Why can't we just use existing ones? So I wasn't sure about the next step either, but I really want to say that I absolutely think we do need outside help trying to figure all this out, because we need a neutral party. We need someone that's a professional and can guide us through, and we can tell them we don't know what we're doing. We're looking at these other districts and they're doing great stuff. We maybe think we want to emulate something like they're doing. We don't know yet. And I would hope that's what the consultant would help us do. A good consultant, I think, would help us do that. Mm-hmm. Work through, come to them and say, this is kind of where we want to go, but we don't know how to get there, and we don't know what the next steps are, and we're looking at other districts and seeing what concrete steps we can take to get there. Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to work on that. We're trying to get some advice from some other districts. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yep.
And I know, I'm sorry, Dana.
No, I was just going to ask, and maybe I don't know whether this is, I'm going to direct it to Michelle, but it might be for Anna.
I'm listening.
Where are we in asking DESE, or the MASC, what they have? To Anna's point is it's worth at the very least sort of seeing if they have a free resource to see what that is.
So as Dorothy explained it to me, she said, yes, they have done Dr. Warman, but they don't have anything off the shelf.
Okay.
Which makes sense to say, here you go. I am going to talk to her tomorrow afternoon. I can, again, ask her, who could you recommend to facilitate as a mediator, someone?
Yeah. Or she was maybe thinking of asking Glenn if he knew someone, because he's from the Cambridge area, so maybe there's people in that area that he has worked with.
Michelle, I'm trying to adjust my glasses. I would offer that this is a very defined area of practice. I mean, I know a lot about this in sort of a layperson's advocate way, but I'm not a professional DEI trainer. This is something people do as their profession. So I think especially in this marketplace, the MASC may have a suggestion, but I could very easily put my fingers on 10 different people that we could call. I have a relationship with many people in the Beverly School Committee. They've recently instituted that. There are resources very close to us that I think, and this is, I'm offering this up as a really heartfelt statement of sort of wanting to collaborate. I have suggested over the last year a couple ideas of things that I know are common practice. A lot of districts start with the bias training. A lot of districts start with an audit. Beverly just released their audit. Salem's doing their audit. That's one tool that some districts could employ. And I suggested those things because I know that that's sort of in the toolbox of common practice, but I think in the spirit of building collaboration and getting us all on the same page, we should really have a big, group talk about it. Like, how do we want to proceed with this conversation? We may end up in that path anyway, but I feel like it really needs to be led by someone with more professional expertise, in the same way we wouldn't make up our own strategic plan. We wouldn't make up our own financial audit. I mean, Vinny knows, well, Vinny's a bad example because he is an auditor, but if Vinny wasn't a rock star, we wouldn't do our own audit. We wouldn't do it internally. This is, to me, a perfect example of getting a little bit of outside help, and then we as a group should decide what is the next thing that we do, and then we can start to build that into the budget cycle, right? I mean, I made a motion earlier in the year to try to allocate funds. I mean, I think that is the next step, because this isn't going to happen, one, for free, or two, by osmosis. Like, we have to plan for it and budget for it. So as we approach next year, I think before we start talking budget, we need to understand what are we budgeting for and why. And I think we need a professional to help us get to that point of consensus.
So let Michelle talk to Dorothy again. If nothing else, and David never answered my question either, so now I'm really going to nail him down. Yeah, go ahead.
Because, David suggested a list of consultants, and gave it, I think, to Tom to research. Like, could we, if we have ideas, give them to you, or?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all we wanted to know.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of ideas, so.
Yeah, because I have talked to other school districts too. So I think talking to people that have already done it with an educational focus.
Right, because that's the tricky part.
Yeah, so on the 28th, Dorothy is coming in to talk to us about the summative.
And we're going to physically go through. I have to talk to her about that. Physically go through doing a couple of them.
And then the thought was, I think we said at the end of that last meeting, to have David share with us his experience from his school. And he had mentioned, let the cat out of the bag, that it was data driven, that they saw the whatever. So I don't know if the 28th could also be a continuation of our talk. Or is it just beating?
Right, and I thought we were also supposed to all come with a definition so that we could see if there are common themes, because if we're not even close on the themes of the definition, then we're going to need to have like one sort of consultant that can get us that way. If we're kind of close on that, then we may need just another type of consultant that does something else. That's what I thought was happening next.
Well, I think from this perspective, I mean, the consultant will tell us. So they're not going to tell us how to act on it, but they will be able to tell us, this is what diversity, equity, inclusion look like in a school district. Here's some examples, here's some strategies, here's some avenues that you can go down. So they're not going to prescribe, an exact course of action for us, but they will be able to get us all on the same page. Okay. And I just don't think we can get all on the same page without outside help.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just want to kind of, because I think I see that the work we've already done, like I see that we're coming together around, in other words, I don't think it was wasted time that we've already done, that we had that discussion about our definition, and that we went to the Dr. Warnham's. Like, that's not wasted time, that's all. And I am in agreement that I think we might need to, like, we had a vision and we might need to adjust as we go along. And it sounds like maybe we might need to put our energy now towards thinking, who would we like to talk to support us in being a facilitator towards creating our next step? And I think what Anna just said is really important, that, like, you didn't actually say slow down, but it is a little bit of slow down, so that we might very well get to what Anna, her motion, but we're not. We want to really make sure that that's exactly what we want to do. So I don't know if there's a motion in there somewhere, but that, like, our next step, we sort of thought it was going to be defining equity, but it might be getting a consultant. And it might be about just talking to a consultant, because there's a money factor here. Like, if there's a free consultant, from the MASC, we need to at least explore that, and then, I don't know.
Yep, so let's
It's
have Mary Beth
complicated.
speak real quick.
Sorry.
Yeah, just one thing that may be worth considering here, as you're thinking about where do we go as a district around that, I wonder if this workshop could potentially be joint with the school committee and the administrators, right? So that we are in partnership with one another and we're building that kind of collective vision as opposed to, okay, administrators are going down this road around where we're headed and school committee's over here. I think if we start together, we might be more powerful out of the gate.
I like that.
Yes, but we just need to think about the timing on that and check with, and if we want it to be in person, is it going to be inconvenient for the administrators? But yes, I think that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say, and I think Dana was getting to it. That's okay.
I'm sorry, I was pointing there.
That's okay.
That was rude. I'm sorry.
I think that is kind of my point, is I don't think it was, I totally agree, I don't think it was a waste, but I'm not sure if us slogging through our individual definitions of equity is actually the right next step. I don't think it's a terrible idea, but like I've said, we're like 2 decades late to this particular party, and I feel like if we brought in someone who's done this with some districts before, they might well say, yeah, that's not the right place to start. Here's 5 other places you could start, and then we can have a conversation about which one feels best for us. And I think Mary Beth is right. Given some of the things that we've seen in the schools already, we've had reports and incidents. We've heard at public comment. There have been incidences in the classroom. There was one, not 2 weeks ago that was student to student that was brought to my attention, and I forwarded to everyone else's attention. So I do feel like this has to be more collaborative. And I think, to Mary Beth's point, we are not actually the people on the ground here. The people on the ground are the teachers and the students. The community at large has a place, and we have a role as the policy setters. But if we go off in a vacuum and do some beautiful planning around what equity means to us as a school committee, and it doesn't have buy-in from the administration who has to actually implement, I don't know that that's going to be effective for us. So I do like the idea of bringing in the administrators in, but I think the next time we talk about this needs to be facilitated by a professional, not us kind of making it up ourselves.
So if you want to get us names, we'll call, we'll see what the cost is, and then we'll talk to Benny, and then we'll see where we go from there. So maybe the next time we talk about it at the workshop, we're talking about what we do. But do you think it would be beneficial to have the leadership team come and talk about what they do around equity and around, even just around like curriculum,
I actually,
review for bias and stuff like that?
Yeah, what I would say is I think it's really important to have this be the leadership team, the committee, and the administrators. I think will do better work that way. I want to just call folks' attention to agendas from now to the end of the year. We're really tight. So I maybe one of the items on the 28th is to figure out a time to have this joint meeting and a process to determine a consultant. But in terms of putting it in an actual meeting right now to the end of the year, we're still thinking about district goals. We have the reorganization meeting. So there's a lot that's coming up that's really time sensitive. And to me, it feels like this is better in a workshop conversation than at a committee meeting. If the committee would like a presentation, we'll certainly figure out how to do that between now and the end of the year. But just looking at what's coming up, that's going to start to get tight. And would it be better to have that in a workshop environment instead of a meeting?
There's a June date workshop, right?
June 16th is on the calendar as a workshop date, so that could be a possibility there.
Yeah, especially if we talk about on the 28th, the process, identifying someone, maybe put together a subcommittee that would, do all of the work to get the person.
And I think,
Going to move on.
I think, again, this is sort of more of a statement of our priorities. I think it does need to be its own workshop, its own conversation, not rushed, not part of regular, but like this district, I mean, what's funny, when I had shared those links of the other districts, and then you look at our district, you know, we have a part of our webpage that says commitment to equity, and it says coming soon or something like that. You know, I think
it's true.
It's true. It is coming soon. But I think that as a district, this needs to be a priority unto itself. I think we need to have a workshop on this, and I think it has to sort of happen in tandem with those overall district goals, because it might well be that one of our district goals for next year is that we improve our equity platform. And what does that mean? Like, that could be one of the goals, but we're never going to make that as a district goal if we haven't sort of made some progress on what are we even trying to accomplish here. And to Mary Beth's point, you know, I have an idea of some of the pitfalls and challenges, but I do think the administrators have knowledge of things on the ground that we may not have heard. You know, we have maybe only heard the worst possible examples. There may be subtleties at play that never rise to our level for whatever reason. So again, like, I'm a big believer that we need to empower the people who have to do the work. And when a student is faced in the moment, right? When a student is faced with a homophobic slur, they're not coming to me or to Julie or to Michelle or Dana. The first person they're going to go to, presumably, is a teacher or an administrator. So we need to make sure that our goals and visions for what this looks like are ground level implemented. We can drive the bus about the vision, and I think that's important. That's policy. But we don't really know everything that's happening because these are sensitive topics, and not every student's going to be really brave like some have. You know, it's amazing that we've had some students write to us directly, but I don't think that's really the best solution.
All right. So, takeaway is some people are going to get us some names. Oh, Peter, I'm sorry. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I just have 3 questions about topics for future meetings.
Oh, perfect. Go.
How can we have this exact same conversation, just substitute DEI for LMS? We just had a half-hour-long conversation about the priority. I've been asking that we talk about LMS since last March. How can we have the same conversation about that? And we had I invited a national and international expert on LMS who could have facilitated that discussion, but no one asked a question. So how can we have that discussion? The other question I have is, the leadership team made a recommendation that we study, survey parents about what they see as a vision. Are we voting on that? Are we accepting that recommendation?
What are you talking about?
There was
About
a
the foreign
recommendation made.
Language?
What's that?
About foreign language?
Yeah, we need to survey parents and ask parents what they see as they want for language here. That was a recommendation. Do we vote on that?
We voted
We didn't vote
to
on that. We voted on other things.
allow the recommendation to go forward, so they'll make the advisory group, the study group.
We didn't vote on the study group.
Okay, so
We heard the recommendation,
I would
but there was no vote.
encourage us not to vote on it and allow Mary Beth to put that together, because if we vote on it, then we make it a public body, and they'll have to meet in open session, and they'll have to follow all the open meeting laws. If we allow Mary Beth to take care of
So are we
it.
just accepting the recommendation? Or just
I guess so.
That's my question. Are we just, is that going to happen?
I think we did.
I don't recall we voted on it. I don't.
I think the motion I made, which was the sort of opposite idea, was voted down. So,
That's what we voted on. We voted on just adding language to the 6th grade.
and that did not pass, so.
Yeah, but I didn't recall voting on that we'd accept that recommendation. And my other question is, what happens, we've gone through 3 superintendents in 3 years. Each superintendent comes in with a new vision, a new, let's study the problem, and we get a new superintendent, and then we start from scratch again. Should we, as a committee, do we hold the next superintendent accountable for following through on plans we've already made?
Right, yeah.
We know that we haven't had a strategic plan since 2017, so Mike Harvey was working on it. He left to go to Masco. Julie came in for a year as interim, and now Mary Beth has set forth, which we voted on last time, the strategic plan. So she's pushing forward with that and Portrait of a Graduate. So does that answer?
Well, kind of, but what happens if the superintendent takes a position elsewhere?
Well, she has
Do
a
we still
3-year
follow?
contract with us, so.
I know, but I'm just saying, but what do we do when we change superintendents and we've started a,
We try to behave well so that our superintendents don't
well,
leave.
that's not answering the question.
um,
But anyway,
Yeah, what I could say to that is that is the value of the strategic plan, right? So that when there are transitions in a district at the superintendent level, at the principal level, you know, in any of those roles, there has already been a plan that has been processed in the community, and those folks are picking up that plan, so that there's not, oh, someone's new here, and there's going to be a whole new set of goals. It's, here are the goals, this is where we're headed. And so that is a real critical value, I think, of the strategic plan, is that it guards against the flavor of the day, right?
Right. And that's one of the things when Dr. Harvey left. He went to Masco that had a 5-year plan, so all the hard work had been done, so.
all right, and lastly, I just want to apologize for my comment about the vote hurting students. I don't believe anyone on this committee votes to hurt students, even if I believe that was the result. I could tell you where it came from. It came from, I am and was frustrated by years of a lack of vision for our district and for our students, and by years of issues being sent to study groups only to die there.
Okay.
So again, I apologize for my comments. I don't
right.
believe anybody votes against students.
So it sounds like we have agreement about what's going to happen with DEI. Do we feel like we need to vote on asking Mary Beth to come back with a recommendation in the fall regarding foreign language? Or do we feel like she's going to do that?
Would the vote just be that we move to request that, I think it said by November?
Right.
Request that Mary Beth returns to us with a recommendation by, let's say, December 1st? Or is
Yeah,
it
I would
second?
actually suggest that you have that recommendation and decide whether or not you're going to accept it by mid-November at the latest, because if we're giving you a preliminary budget February, January, we're going to need to know what that number is.
Do that.
So 2 questions. I feel like, to sort of get to Peter's question, I think in the absence of approval of the motion I made, I think what we've deferred back to is the budget that was passed. I mean, the budget that's on the table has no 6th grade foreign language and has Spanish and Mandarin starting in the 7th grade. That's what's in the fiscal year 22 budget. So I feel like by default, like that is, I don't think we have to vote again because I think it's already in the budget.
No, that's not what I was asking to vote on. It's the recommendation to ask parents to go to have a study group to ask parents what they want for language.
So I guess to that question, and this sort of goes back to Mary Beth, I mean, the timeline that we've just outlined is very similar to the Portrait of the Graduate and starting the strategic plan. I stand by what I said earlier. I don't think that making foreign language an outlier study group is a good use of time. I feel like that has to be part of the larger conversation. So I personally don't feel like we need to charge Mary Beth with a specific task of, we want a foreign language recommendation on such and such a date. I think that the conversation about foreign language needs to be part of our overall Portrait of Graduate. And I think, I mean, I don't know that we have to vote on this. I think philosophically, everybody at this table wants more foreign language and they want it earlier. I don't know that anyone would fight. I don't think anybody would advocate for that, and if they would, I might fight them on that. So I think high level, like, we all kind of want the same thing. The question is, how do we pay for that? What languages, how soon, what age, like then we have to unpack the nuts and bolts. But I think the philosophical question to Mary Beth is actually already answered. We should not be a district that doesn't want more foreign language as early as possible. We just have to figure out how we implement it, and that should be part of the strategic planning process. That should be part of the portrait of the graduate. I mean, that's,
I think we've answered the question, so the question is no. Okay,
Yeah.
great. All right, so I'm going
less work.
to move that we go into an executive session for purpose number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the Hamilton-Wenham Education Association, and not to return to open session. I feel like 3 says, and in case it doesn't, that, and that having it in an open session would impact the bargaining position of us, the district. Seconded by Michelle. This has to be a roll call vote because we're going into an executive session. So, Peter?
Yes.
Julia?
Yes.
Michelle?
yes.
Michelle Bailey, yes.
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 Yes, perfect.
Can we use the bathroom?
Yes. So,
I didn't know if it was.
yeah.
We need to.
Are we physically, are we?
Are we physically going somewhere? I don't know if he's
done this
there.
before.
Is he there?
I've never
Turn that off.
You're done.
You're done. Thank you.
Do we actually go somewhere?